put that in the
fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I can think climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I can think to I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
And one here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, good morning and happy Friday to you. Alex Phillips here with you through until 1 o'clock today in my little cosy Friday slot that I do so enjoy. Thank you so much for your company. Lots of news going around today, isn't there? The geopolitics, that's all hotting up. The coalition of the willing all meeting up. About 50 countries saying that they're ready to go to the defence of Ukraine. We've also got Prince Harry in Ukraine visiting an orthopaedics clinic for veterans at the same time as Russia ups their antics over there. A lot of heavy bombardments in the last few days. We've also got the astonishing story on today's front of the Sun newspaper, which is, of course, written artfully just a few floors below me here, about thieves just stripping the shelves of Greggs. They go in, they fancy a snack, whack, 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 few sausage rolls, chicken slice, out they go. And no one stops them. We're basically at the point of looting now in this country. We've become such a low-trust society that petty crime just happens everywhere you go. It's about time we found a new island like Australia and put them all on there. And Sir Keir Starmer's been accused of watering down the pledge on grooming gang inquiries. The Labour Party are absolutely scared senseless. We know that they turned a blind eye to those atrocities taking place, particularly in northern towns, for decades. If these people could just shut up and not threaten the multiculturalist project. Well, there you go. The dignity, the integrity, the safety of women and girls in this country sacrificed at the altar of diversity. Right. That's what we're going to be chewing over today, along with a lot of other stuff. You don't want to miss it. So do stay tuned for the next 3 hours. Take me with you wherever you're going. You can download the snazzy little Talk application, and I can ride in your pocket as you drive in your car or mow the lawn or go to the shop. Stick your headphones on. There I will be, like the voice of conscience in your head. If you want to join the conversation as well, the number is 03444 991 1000. You can dial that at any moment to register your interest with the gorgeous Alicia, who is my favourite producer. She is ready to take your call and make sure that you pass our stringent vetting here in Talk Towers and then hopefully be patched through to the studio. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to text. Remember to write the word talk in front of your message. That way it pings the Mars broadcast on top of Talk Towers that feeds it directly into my little Cape Canaveral setup here in the studios. We're on next at talkTV. OK, let's get to it, shall we? Because I'm joined now by the one and only Benedict Spence. Good morning to you, Benedict. How are you?
Good morning. I could be better. I've got a cold, but I'm fine apart from that.
Are those colds still rattling around? I thought we'd done with that season now. I'm glad you're via Zoom and not in the studio, because honestly I had like sickness for about 3 months post-Christmas. Not for it anymore. Right, let's talk about Mr. Prince Harry, because he was a surprise visit in court, in the High Court in London the other day, arguing his life was in danger unless we, the taxpayer, paid for him to have full armed police protection, the likes of which is pretty much only granted to the royal family, of which he now nominally is no longer. But then after moaning that his life could be at risk, he's decided to fly straight into a war zone. I mean, what do you make of this? I mean, it's good, I think, you know, Harry showing his support for veterans over in Ukraine. Do you think this has been deliberately timed to stick two fingers up at Donald Trump?
Possibly, if Donald Trump was actually paying attention. If nothing else, it might say rather more about the competency of Ukraine's security services, which, to be fair, you know, they are in the middle, as you say, of an active war. You would expect them to be a slightly better state than ours. But this is, of course, a bit of an ongoing thing, isn't it, about the general poor quality, not just of our armed forces, but of our security services as well. So maybe Ukraine is one of the few places in the world that actually you think, yeah, it's not that bad relatively, or if you're a high-profile individual. But yeah, certainly I think that there's no love lost, is there, between Harry and Donald Trump, as and when Donald Trump remembers Harry exists. I think he said something to the effect of he feels sorry for him.
Yeah, exactly. He said he's got enough to contend with his wife without Donald Trump adding visa issues into the mix.
So maybe it's a pity thing. Maybe he's hoping that, you know, if he spends more time in Ukraine, that Donald Trump will feel sorry for him and send stuff to Ukraine. I don't know. But certainly, when it's juxtaposed against the whole, you know, Harry being upset about his lack of protection in the UK, which, to be fair, I do think he should probably have a form of protection in the UK. He is a very high-profile individual. We do, because of various reasons, not have the best security situation at the moment in the UK, which maybe we can get onto in a bit. So I do have some sympathy for him there. But it does seem... It's an oddly provocative thing, isn't it, to then fly into perhaps the most high-profile active war zone in the world.
Right, exactly. But technically, he does have protection if he wants it. He can fund his own security guards to come over and vigilantly take care of him. The only thing they're not allowed to do is carry a gun, and most of our police don't in this country.
Yeah, and I disagree with that. I think he should be given protection. As somebody who, yeah, he fought in Afghanistan in a very high-profile situation. He didn't have to say the things he said in his book. That was very foolish. But nonetheless, he is a very high-profile target for certain jihadist groups around the world, which we know, if they could get a chance, would operate in this country. And, you know, Islamist terror is still the biggest threat to security domestically in this country. We can't get away from that. So I do actually think that for that reason, and because he is, you know, ostensibly a member of the royal family, he should get armed protection, and that it should be paid for by the state. You know, I'd prefer it that we didn't have
technicality here, though. Is the technicality here? The problem is, because he is not a member of the royal family, legally, if he is granted armed protection in the UK, then Beyonce can come over and say, well, look, I'm an international superstar. You know, a hit on my life would be worth a lot to somebody who wanted to deliberately make me a target. Lord knows Taylor Swift could say the same, given how much her events have been targeted. And then all of a sudden, you've essentially got the UK police force for rent to high-profile celebrities. And this is about the technicality of the law, isn't it? That Harry is now saying, I want this as a private individual. And that's the sticking point. A private individual does not automatically, however high-profile, get access to our armed police.
Taylor Swift and Beyonce have not fought in a war zone. As far as I'm aware, you know, this could have gone, you know, below the radar and we haven't heard about. When they are in the UK for concerts, for major events, there is a lot of police protection there. And we all know about, you know, the legacy, of course, of the Manchester Arena bombing and the Ariana Grande concert. There are very good reasons for that. As far as I'm aware, though, when they're just sort of going about their business, they don't. But when they are actually here for, you know, a purpose, they do get a degree of police protection. But again, it's all very well to say that he's not a member of the royal family. He's not an official working member of the royal family. But if we have a sort of a kind hearts and coronet situation where there are enough untimely, unfortunate deaths, that does become a question again. He is he does have a claim to the throne, so it's not as if he is some incredibly minor royal that nobody's ever heard of. He is a very high-profile individual, and as I say, he's made some very silly mistakes. He's brought a lot of this heat, if you like, on himself. But I'm sorry, I do think that, one or two police officers armed with guns is not going to bankrupt the taxpayer. And again, given that he fought terrorists in Afghanistan, I don't think that that's an unfair thing or too much for the taxpayer to bear.
Talking about police protection, should we be looking to put in a few bobbies to protect our pasties? Because shoplifters are stripping the shelves of Greggs completely bare. And the staff can do nothing about it. I mean, people are just going and helping themselves to all sorts of delicious baked goods and walking out. And frankly speaking, this doesn't surprise me. Where I live in London, my neighbourhood 4 years ago when I moved to it was pretty pleasant. Now you walk up the main road and all of the shops from Boots to the Co-op, one of the exits is blocked off, so you can only enter and exit through the same door because of all the looting, because of just persistent, brazen shoplifting. Why is this happening? Why are people getting away with this? Why do we now live in such a low-trust society that just standard decorum, as if, pay for your lunch, doesn't seem to exist anymore?
Yeah, low trust is exactly the expression. And this has been fueled by a number of things. There's never just one answer, but you can talk about rising levels of relative poverty. You can talk about mass migration. You can talk about all sorts of things. But the key thing here is prevention and also response, I would say. And again, it's not the only thing. But I was reading up about this, and Singapore is often sort of used as an example of a society done very well. Lee Kuan Yew, the former leader of Singapore, came over to this country in, I think, the 50s or maybe the 60s, and was amazed at how high trust our society was. The fact that people simply did not break the law. You could leave. The example that's always taken is the newspaper stand that didn't have a person on it. It just had a little box for you to put your money in. And he stood and he observed as people took their newspaper, they put the money in. If they didn't have the right amount of money, they'd put a note in there and they'd count out the right amount of change. And he said, I want this for my country. And Singapore instituted an incredibly harsh regime of laws that includes things like, public beatings and things like that. But nonetheless, it managed to turn Singapore from a war-ravaged third world country to one of the highest trust societies on earth. So much so that those sort of punishments don't really get handed out.
Is that what needs to happen here, essentially? Far harsher law enforcement? Because I think it speaks to something that's changed fundamentally in our culture. And I think it speaks to this sense that we have apologised for criminality for too long. We've heard that, people are shoplifting because food banks, it must be austerity. Or we've heard, it's because they're a racial minority and therefore they've been victimised, so it's their right. And I think a lot of stuff we inherit from America, where essentially shoplifting has been totally decriminalised in a lot of US states, particularly if you happen to be black after the BLM movement. And people kind of think, well, if it's good enough for the goose, it's good enough for the gander. If that person gets to shoplift and get away with it. And also this sort of glut now of criminal organisations. I don't think enough people understand that a huge amount of shoplifting that's taking place is being done by criminal gangs to order. They're going in and filling up baskets or armfuls of meat. I mean, in the Co-op on my street, a steak is now in some sort of little see-through perspex plastic coffin. It's in a box.
Yeah, it's the fact that we have a situation now where people can commit hundreds of shoplifting offences and still not get long custodial sentences. That's what you really should be doing. I appreciate that very often at the start of when somebody's very young, they make a mistake, you want to be a little bit lenient. You don't want to sort of go in all guns blazing. But when we get to the stage where it's 20, 30, 40, 100, 200 shoplifting offences, and people are still not being told 5 years or more in prison, and you're being told a couple of months, It's not a deterrent. That's the fact of the matter is, and that's, I'm not sort of sitting here and saying we need to do like Singapore and bring in public beatings, but I would like to see people who just brazenly break the law slapped with very punitive measures. And when people talk about how, it's disproportionate, you can't send somebody to prison for 5 years for stealing food, that's very disproportionate. Yes, that's the point. It's
Right.
supposed to be disproportionate so that you terrify those people who, as you say, this is not being done because of massive amounts of poverty. There are some people in poverty, but those facilities, like food banks, already exist for those people. It does not drive you to break the law. It is
right.
opportunism.
I mean,
that
I'm
is
going
driving.
to make a strident remark here.
Sure.
I think something that has taken place, this happens in the big cities. I'm afraid when you go to the rural England, you have people with, eggs from their chickens and an honesty box. Take a box of eggs and stick in a quid. And everybody does that in huge parts of rural England. People get away with not even locking their front door. Neighbours know each other. It's something about big cities. And I think that this is directly connected to immigration. People who come here either deliberately to criminally exploit our country in the form of Eastern European gangs nicking a load of meats and luxury wines to fill up with vans and drive over to the latest fancy restaurant in their criminal neighbourhood back at home. But also this sort of people who don't have any connection to society. They don't care about their neighbours. They don't speak the language. They don't feel like they owe anything to this country because it's not their legacy. It's not their heritage. Their ancestors didn't build it. And as a result, they think they can just go on the take, go on the rob, get away with it. And it's bred now a culture where Brits are going, oh, well, if these people are doing it, I may as well do it as well.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. But I would actually dispute the idea that this is entirely about big cities, because it's not anymore. I'm from a rural part of the country, much like you. And even though these things like, the quintessential little, box out the front of somebody's farm door with the eggs and all that sort of thing, that still exists. The rate of criminality in the countryside is going up faster in some places than it is in cities. And that's because there are even fewer police officers per head of population in a lot of rural areas. And there's no CCTV, there's no ability to actually pick up and stuff. So when you read up on things like sheep rustling, which, my word, in this day and age, sheep rustling, it's going on a massive
Again, I
scale.
ask the question, who are the people doing the sheep rustling? Who are the people nicking the GPS equipment from tractors? Who are the people siphoning off petrol from farm vehicles? I'm not saying that none of them are British people, but what I'm saying is we've let in a lot of people into this country who are simply here to commit crime.
A lot of the foot soldiers, if you like, are often British people who are down on their luck, but it's who they answer to that's the question. And it's often Eastern European gangs, because a lot of this stuff, you took the example of the GPS and all that sort of thing, or of engines or cars or things like that. It all gets put on a truck. It all gets shipped to Albania or Bulgaria, places like that. That's who they're paying. That's who's paying for this sort of stuff.
Let's talk about foreign criminal gangs. Again, in the light of the mass police raids on barber shops, on vape shops, on nail salons, it's been blimmin' obvious to me and probably everybody else in this country when you go past the hand car wash, when you see yet another souvenir shop pop up in London, which nobody is going and buying anything from, with the same usual suspects behind the counter, and you think, how can they afford the business rates? When you go to a little market town in Wiltshire, and for some reason there's now 7 Turkish hairdressers, that these are being used as fronts for money laundering. It's been apparent to me for ages, and I've been wondering why, for the best part of 5 years now, how this is brazenly happening under our own eyes and nothing's been done about it. I'm pleased to say, actually, that there are now raids taking place, and guess what they found out? Oh, that's right. A lot of these Turkish-style barber shops who cut about, 1 skull of hair a day are actually fronts for international crime gangs, largely attached to people trafficking, largely Kurdish gangs. How on earth have these been able to pop out 7 to a high street? I mean, is there nobody who does a check and balance? Is it just if you want to open a shop, you just go to the estate agent, rent the property, landlord agrees, and that's it? Are local authorities not having an eyes on what's going on in their towns and trying to do something about it?
Yeah, I mean, they've popped up again. These Turkish barbers in particular, they're popping up in lots of rural areas as well, where you kind of sit there and you go, where on earth is the business for these people? But they're there nonetheless. And it is the fact that it's so brazen. It's so brazen and it's in plain sight. But you know what? I think a lot of the reasoning behind it, and I think they're smart about this, is because they brand it, if, as you say, as a sort of an international thing, a Turkish barber. And the average sort of liberal middle class Brit official in a local council or police office sits there and goes, diversity is our strength. I can't possibly raise any questions about that. And this is a living, breathing example of diversity. So that must be a good thing. I think that they have hijacked and played upon, frankly, the idiocy of many people in this country, many people in positions of middling power, which has always been the case. This isn't a new thing, that actually the sort of the petty official in your local council has always been somebody who's not particularly bright and got there because it was a safe position and they knew somebody. But they've played on that. And as you say, there's not been until now a massive pushback. But the pushback is coming because members of the public, largely on social media, are bombarding police officers and journalists, politicians saying, guys, this has been going on for years. Why aren't you doing your jobs?
Yeah, I rather reckon actually the Labour Party are going to leave the Conservative Party to shame and show the general public that things can be done on this front. It's not very often I shower praise on the Labour Party, but it's fantastic to see this problem finally being taken care of. It makes me sick to my back teeth. This is our country, Benedict. This is the country that we've built through paying our taxes, that our parents have built through paying their taxes, our grandparents fought in world wars to defend, and we've just opened it up to any old Tom, Dick and Harry from Lord knows where to come and criminally exploit, and it makes me sick to my back teeth. Benedict, my darling, thank you ever so much. If you have thoughts and feelings on this as strong as mine, then I dare say that you may want to join our communal catharsis. Come and lie upon the psychologist's couch in talkTV, metaphorically speaking, that is, by calling the number 0344 499 1000. It's charged at your normal network rate. You can send me a WhatsApp on that number, or indeed leave me a voice note. 87222 is the number to send me a text message. You must write talk before your message if you're going to use old-fashioned SMS. What are your thoughts on all these people raiding Greggs of sausage rolls? What's it like in your neighbourhood? Have you noticed a huge uptick in criminality? And who is behind it? I want your thoughts. And right, hopefully that'll be coming up after this break. Don't go anywhere.
Well, this announcement is really tiresome because it's at least the third time that the government have said it. Notably, they mentioned it back in December. And I think they're trying to shy away today from the truth of what they said on previous announcements, namely that a third of these officers will be taken from other roles to go into neighbourhood policing. A third will be PCSOs, police community support officers, and a third will be special constables. Yeah. That's what they were saying previously.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, welcome back to the show. Alan in Merseyside says shoplifters should be treated the same as if they've put hurty words on Twitter. Right. Ridiculous. That poor Lucy Connolly, sentenced to 32 months in prison for a Facebook post, not even allowed leave. Not even allowed leave to go and see her husband and her kid. You know, lots of the people who knew her said she was an absolutely wonderful childminder. She's banged up for getting angry and moaning about the state of the nation. And then all these people just robbing, looting, stealing, nicking, crashing, littering. Nothing. Just brazenly getting away with it. I am sick to the back teeth. Someone has messaged Ian saying corporal punishments for shoplifters, cheap, effective, and it works. Well, that's the thing. I mean, we're not going to be allowed to bring back corporal punishment, are we? That goes against all sorts of human rights acts and the lot of it. But I tell you what, right? Not that I'm advocating this in Britain, but I used to live in Africa. And if you nick something in Ghana, you go and make up with someone's wallet, believe me, you're going to be found in a pretty sorry state later on in the day. I'm not suggesting vigilantism. I'm not suggesting that we sort of start putting neighbourhood watch on steroids. But it did, you know, once upon a time, we created Asbo Islands, didn't we? That's my nickname for Australia. All those people who nicked a loaf of bread, we shipped them off to the other side of the country and said, there you go and build the new world. But now just nothing happens. There is absolutely no punishment whatsoever if you go out and rob and steal. And the other crazy thing is we have more technology today than we've ever had in identifying shoplifters. When I go to Co-op, when I want to buy a pint of milk, they've got this little camera there at the self-service checkouts where they're filming your face. They know exactly who I am and if I've decided to go on the rob. You know, ring doorbells, all the rest of this. We live in one of the most CCTV'd nations on earth, and yet we can't seem to catch a shoplifter. It's not like they particularly bother to disguise it. They just go in knowing that they're going to get away with it. It really gets on my goat. It really does. Something else that has got on my goat is the fact that this disgraceful human being is allowed to practice law, and not just practice law. He's taking the government to court over our prescribing of Hamas as a terrorist organisation. This is Fahad Ansari, a South London-based solicitor who described himself as an immigration and nationality lawyer striving to secure your rights to enter and reside in the UK with dignity. Nobody has a right to come into the UK and just live here. It's not some sort of international charity shop. Oh, yeah, everyone gets to live in Britain. But what's worse is this ne'er-do-well's decided he wants to celebrate Hamas, make sure that they're not described as a terrorist organisation in the UK, no doubt give them the right to reside here with dignity, and says that they don't pose any threat to Britain or British citizens. This is him talking to Peter Cardwell.
You have told me that you have decided to represent Hamas. They are an unspeakably horrific and dreadful organisation.
Oh,
so yes, I am associating you with them because you've decided to represent them.
Okay, I think you might be hearing from the police. I mean, I don't know, but it sounds like you might. The low point on the Irish side of the Irish Sea is Pat Finucane, of course, right? A British MP stood up in Parliament and said he's just like his clients. Pat Finucane represented members of the Provisional IRA, which is another proscribed organisation. And 3 weeks later, Pat Finucane was, of course, murdered in front of his family by loyalist paramilitaries who we now know had handlers in the British establillment. So you are playing the same. Don't talk over me.
Let's talk about Hamas. I'll talk over you if you want to. No, excuse me.
You're playing the same game. You put
I'm not playing any games. I'm not playing any games.
You just put a target on my back.
I'm not putting a target on anybody's back. I am asking you. No, I don't.
You owe me an apology.
No, I don't. I'm asking you why you've decided. Why have you decided to represent Hamas?
Next question.
Am I getting it clear, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you believe that Hamas have a right to use armed force to represent their position?
You keep asking me what I believe, which again is it's not quite as blatant and disgusting as your previous question. But
what's interesting is that Hamas. Well, I mean, you're representing these people, and you've chosen to do so. So presumably, it has something to do with what you believe.
Do you not understand how the legal system works?
Yes, I do, and I understand that you didn't have to take the case. If I were a lawyer and if someone came to me, I would say there's not in a million years would I represent Hamas. They are a disgusting, horrendous, anti-Semitic, dreadful terrorist organisation. That's what I would say. You didn't say that, and I'm very interested as to why.
Because you're trying to make the story about me instead of this important application because you're not a serious journalist, is that right?
What a snooty, uppity, idiotic, little weaselly man. Oh, next question. Doesn't want to answer what Peter was putting forward as a very sensible question. You chose to take on the case to represent Hamas. Why? Why? Be accountable. Is it to line your pockets with foreign money, no doubt funding this? I don't know if they are. Is that it? Is it just to earn a buck or two, or do you believe in the cause? I think that is a very important thing that we should know. And it disgusts me that we have these lawyers who will stand up for the so-called rights of terrorist organisations over and above the safety and dignity of people in this country. Hamas are a terrorist organisation. Doesn't matter what it says in the statute books, they terrorise. What was October the 7th? The mass rape and murder of women, of babies, in their own houses, in their own safe rooms, ordinary citizens. People at a music festival. If that is not terrorism, you show me what is. But the problem here, right, I mean, Hamas, are they a threat to British people? Yes, they are. This sort of Islamic extremism is fundamentally a threat to the British way of life. I don't care about the situation in the Middle East. I don't care, frankly speaking, whether people side with one or the other and says, oh, well, you know, Palestine belongs to the East. But, I mean, you pick up your Bibles, your Qurans, you know, your Torahs, whatever, and fight that out. But if you are cutting the heads off people, dismembering people, raping them, abusing them, leaving bloodshed, cold-blooded, blood-curdling murder, you're a terrorist. You're a terrorist organisation. It's very, very simple. And the reason they are a threat, frankly, to our way of life here in Britain, is all these marches that are being organised, the pro-Palestine marches being heavily funded. Well, it's starting to lead people to hold anti-Semitic, anti-Western opinions. A poll by the Henry Jackson Society, the think tank which specialises in terrorism and foreign affairs, estimated that around 43% of Muslims in this country support Hamas. Only 1 in 4 think that Hamas committed murder and rape. Only 1 in 4. What world are they living in? This fundamentally threatens our way of life, our position as the West, our civilization, our cultural mores, our dignity, and our safety. Right, let's take a short break now. When I come back, we're going to be talking about Trump's tariffs. What's going on now? Are they here? Is he freezing them? Is he whacking them up? How's China going to respond? But most importantly, what does that mean for us in the United Kingdom? I'm going to be joined by my favourite economist of them all, Liam Halligan, after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Tariffs, tariffs. Donald Trump's new favourite word in the English language. He said he was going to do it. He said he was going to basically whack tariffs on everyone he says has been using and abusing American kindness as the world's biggest economy. A lot of countries have been very protectionist against America, thinking we can't compete with them, so we better put up barriers to trade. And Donald Trump has said enough is enough. If you don't let us sell our stuff in your country without tariffs and without tariff barriers, we are going to do the same to you. We are going to block you from exporting to what is probably one of the hungriest, greediest markets on the planet. And you kind of think to yourself, well, fair play, fair enough, why not? But what sort of effect is this going to have on the global economy? Is it going to overheat things and create hyperinflation? What about us with our 10% tariffs? Apparently, we need to get on with getting on and forging a very good trade deal with America, or those tariffs are set to stay. Well, let's speak to Liam Halligan, my favourite economist of them all, columnist at The Telegraph and author of When the Facts Change Substack. Hello, Liam.
Alex, good to see you. I'm liking the new glasses.
Oh, do you know what? I'm feeling a bit tired today. Every now and then I put my bins on just to make myself look more intelligent so my eyes don't look like proverbial holes in the snow. Right, let's talk about tariff land. I did wrote a little piece myself on my own Substack about this the other day and what Trump's strategy might be behind whacking all of these tariffs up. Is it working, though? Are things going according to plan? Because the markets are sort of looking at Trump going, he's flip-flopping a lot. He put all these tariffs up against the world. He's now deciding he might have to freeze them or pause that sort of activity other than when it comes to China. What is going on?
Well, I do think there's definitely a strategy. It's not right just to say that Trump is bonkers, as a lot of, columnists in the UK want to say. There's a lot of sort of people that instinctively don't like America very much and absolutely don't like Trump. There's definitely a strategy, and the strategy is to try and correct a situation where, and it's true, tariffs against America, particularly from the European Union and China, have been much higher than the tariffs that America has imposed on when importing goods from overseas, and he wants to correct that. He also wants to weaken the dollar. Why would he want to weaken the dollar? Because that makes US exports more competitive, and that will help him to rebuild American manufacturing. The American heartlands were very much abandoned by both Democrats and Republicans in the 90s and 2000s. It was all about Wall Street, it was all about the financiers, and he wants to rebuild that manufacturing capacity, those blue-collar jobs that gave a lot of American people such good lives back in the day. But even though he's got a strategy, and it is a strategy, his implementation of it has been, extremely punchy, and also the markets are pushing back. So I do think he blinked. I don't buy this spin that the 90-day moratorium on the reciprocal tariffs, the much higher tariffs above 10%, was in the plan. I don't buy that. I don't buy the fact that he wasn't spooked by this huge spike in what we call US Treasury yields, costs of government borrowing for the US, which of course impact borrowing costs across the Western world. So I do think he has been unsettled by financial markets. I do think people around him, not least Treasury Secretary Bessent, have convinced him to impose this moratorium. But that doesn't mean there isn't a plan. There is a plan, but it's so complicated and it's so ambitious that it's going to be, as we say in economics, it's going to be iterative. You get there bit by bit. You don't eat the elephant in one big gulp. So a lot of people just say he's mad. He's not mad at all. He's just extremely ambitious, and he's being buffeted by a massive pushback from global financial markets.
I mean, this is it. He is a bullish man. He is a forceful man. And one might say, well, actually, in the first instance, there is going to be short-term pain. We will see price rises if tariffs are being put on to goods that have been imported before various businesses can be onshored, before big companies who can afford to make the move go, well, I may as well now manufacture X, Y, and Z over in America, creating those blue-collar and grey-collar jobs, reindustrialising elements of the Rust Belt. But what's going to be the impact on us? Why are we facing 10% tariffs? My understanding is it's because of a lot of legacy alignment with good old Brussels.
It's because he's put tariffs on 10% across the board to show that he's serious. It could, of course, been a lot higher for the UK because we do have some legacy tariffs that were imposed when we were members of the European Union, and our useless politicians haven't got rid of those tariffs, even though they end up protecting products that we don't even make. So the tariffs, the legacy tariffs from the European Union, all they do is make life more expensive for our consumers. They're completely mad. But look, I genuinely think for all the buffeting and the squalls and the thrills and spills on global markets, and look, I don't underestimate how difficult they're making life for people if you're trying to buy or sell a house at the moment, if you're a business trying to refinance. I mean, this stuff is really, really difficult. It feels like the sort of run up to 2008. It feels like, a rerun of the mad Eurozone crisis that we were all told could never happen, and then it happened in 2010 and 2011. This stuff really does hurt. But aside from that, I do think the UK's genuinely got an opportunity. Why? Because Trump is very soon going to need to show that his policy of throwing everything up in the air is actually bearing fruit. And the fruit will be with trade deals with major countries that he can point to his opponents, both in his own party and elsewhere in Congress across the aisle, and the sceptical American public who aren't MAGA supporters, though a lot are, of course. And I would say that if he can say to America and the world, hey, look, I just did a trade deal with the Brits. The Brits have been in the European Union for, decades. They never had a trade deal with the US. The EU hasn't got a trade deal with the US. I just did a trade deal with the Brits. Who wants some? Who wants some more? So I actually think this isn't complete idle speculation. I actually think there is a chance that a trade deal with the UK, and of course it will be controversial, and of course there'll be endless nonsense talked about chlorinated chicken. I lived in the States for years, ate a lot of chicken. I'm fine. I'm not a chicken. There's chlorine in the salad that we eat. There's whole
chlorine in the water,
for
crying out loud.
It will be controversial, but if we can do a trade deal with the US, and I think he may be up for it, then that could completely change the world's view of what he's actually doing.
But this is the thing, he is using tariffs as a geopolitical lever as well, isn't he? He's using it to try and put China back in a box. I mean, looking at what's going on in Ukraine and finding Chinese fingerprints on dual-use goods that have ended up in Russian weapons. About a quarter of them have come from China. Talk now of there actually being Chinese boots on the ground in Ukraine on the Russian side.
China are all over Ukraine. China are all over Ukraine, and they have been since the very beginning. We just haven't wanted to talk about it. China are also massively involved with attempts to do a peace deal in Ukraine, but again, we just don't want to talk about it. But it's true.
But this is it. He is using tariffs also as a geopolitical device, saying, whose side are you on? China's side or my side? And he's saying to Sir Keir Starmer, essentially, because what I've heard, I do a lot of American media, is one of the conditions of any trade deal with the UK will be making sure that we have free speech. We know that the White House is deeply concerned about the state of affairs in Brussels. They're deeply worried about what they see as an act of self-harm happening across governments in Europe. And they're basically saying, look, your job is to be the vanguards of Western civilization. Get on with it. Step up to the plate. Make sure that you put your own people first. And I get the impression that soon enough, Sir Keir Starmer is going to be in the very difficult position of having to decide whether he's an Atlanticist or whether he does want ever closer ties with the European Union.
It would certainly be a real irony if, a North London lawyer who came into politics in 2015 and spent the first, 5 or 6 years in Parliament trying to stop Brexit every day of his life. He was the flag bearer of all that disgraceful parliamentary chicanery to try and stop a referendum from being implemented before it even, reversing it before it had even been allowed to take effect. Would have been completely outrageous. And now it may be that he's going to stand next to Trump, an arch advocate of Brexit, of course, and sign a trade deal with the US that would have been impossible when we were in the European Union. I think his head's going to explode. And as for Ed Davey, I think he's going to just blow up completely with outrage and anger. But look, Of course, Trump is trying to use tariffs as a geopolitical weapon, and I've said that there is some method in his madness, and there is. I've also said, yes, he definitely blinked in the face of pushback from financial markets, particularly bond markets, over the last 36, 48 hours. But look, I do think he's miscalculating in a very, very specific way, Alex. 1945, the US was the leader of the free world. It had the moral rectitude to do that because it was on the right side of the Second World War. All right, they came pretty late, but they got there in the end, right? And so the US was able to carry the world as the kind of torchbearer of a new world order. The same, though less understood but still relevant, in the mid-80s there was something called the Plaza Accord, where the US got together the big economies of the world, mainly the G7 back then, and said, look, the dollar's too high. All of you are demanding the dollar. You're all storing your reserves in the dollar. This is killing our industry. We want you guys to allow your currencies to go up against the dollar so we become more competitive again. And the rest of the world went, fair dues, you're America, we'll do that for you, right?
Yeah.
Trump is now betting, when he's only got a 4-year term, of course he can't come back because it's his second term, the congressional midterms, and he's got a tiny little majority in the House of Representatives, are going to be campaigning soon. He is trying to do all this in 4 years, right? At a time when America does not have the kind of moral, it doesn't generate the kind of moral loyalty across the world that it used to, not just in the Western world.
Right.
But there's now another whole part of the world, the global south. You know, it's the BRIC economies, Brazil, Russia, India, and China. The economies together are bigger than the G7.
Right. And talking tough against
Trump
Russia,
really
for
be the
instance,
global leader?
something
I'm
we're
not sure he
waiting
can.
for him to do.
I'm not sure he can.
Liam, thank you ever so much. We've got to go to a break now. Fascinating as always, speaking to Liam Halligan. He's the one man on planet Earth that makes economics interesting and understandable. But that is a feat in itself. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we're going to be talking to Norman Brennan, former police officer, about the brazen theft on our high streets, but also about all the nonsense anti-white bias being inflicted upon our police forces around the country. Don't go anywhere.
You've got to get Rotherham Council in the dock, haven't you?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. You've got to get them all in there.
Well, you've got to get Rotherham Police in the dock. Why did you not act? Etc. So it has to have statutory powers. I am told on good authority that there will be an announcement coming on Monday of a new course of action that I think will lead down the judicial review path. So something is about to happen that may be more substantial.
Well, certainly a lot of people would very much welcome that.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. We live in a world, right? We live in a country where we used to have a high trust society where you knew your neighbour, you'd keep your front door unlocked, you'd make sure Mrs. Miggins down the road was healthy and well. Everyone looked out for everyone else, and there was social stigma attached to being a ne'er-do-well, a toe rag. We used to live in a world where if you were a youngster who went out on the rob, you'd be shoved in a boar stall and then hopefully get corrected via the British Army. But no, now we live in a country riddled with foreign gangs, organised crime from every single corner of the world, from the Chinese to the Vietnamese to the Kurdish to the Turkish to the Albanians, all getting involved with criminality in this country, treating us like mugs. We live in a world as well where police officers are told, oh, well, you know, because this person isn't from here, because this person's disadvantaged by the colour of their skin, we better go easy on them. We live in a world where I get to the tube station in the morning and the usual characters push straight through the barriers. And the high-vis people, all the jobs worths who normally would jump upon somebody if they happen not to scan their Oyster card correctly, will just turn a blind eye because they don't dare to stand up and protect the rest of us from these people who just brazenly break the law, who jump ticket barriers. Who knows who carries a knife in this day and age? We live in a world where brazen thieves have been filmed stripping the shelves of Greg's Bakery bare across Britain. They just go in and just help themselves. Why bother going to the till when you can just take it off the shelf and walk straight out and no one's going to do anything about it? We live in a world where the race to the bottom is now happening at a startling rate. Well, let's speak to Norman Brennan, who is a former police officer. Norman, I mean, what's going on? Why is looting and shoplifting and people just on the nick everywhere now?
It's because the lawlessness has crept into Britain like we've never seen. I regularly tell you that I've been in law and order and policing for 46 years. So I've seen the generational change. You're absolutely right. There's a Greggs at the bottom of my road. I go in there and I often speak to shop owners and keepers and I ask them about theft. They say every day of the week. There isn't a shop in the area I live, which is Twickenham, which is a very affluent area, that is not blighted by theft. You highlighted quite eloquently earlier on about your frustration. There's about 4,000 gangs in Britain, 4,000, not 400. They're normally 15, 20 strong. Not only do some of these assassinate each other, rob people at knife point in the high streets, but they daily go into shops and steal and walk out. They daily travel across the tube and railway network without paying. They're feral and lawlessness. And as you rightly say, people just stand by and do nothing. But in defence of the TfL staff and rail staff, it's not really their job to put themselves in harm's way. And would you, Alex, on the sort of money they're paid, put yourself at risk? Not only do you face perhaps being given a good hiding, worse still, being stabbed to death.
Right.
But if that particular person travels through there daily, they will target you with their friends.
Yeah. Well, also, you stand the risk of being told off for being a racist by your very own police force, probably. Apparently, Yvette Cooper has refused to criticise a police force accused of having a racist recruitment policy. This was West Yorkshire Police, who put a block on hiring white candidates. If you're banning people by the colour of their skin from applying for and having a job, that's basically a form of apartheid.
I'm lost with what's going on, Alex. I'm utterly lost. I'm in touch with police officers, both serving and retired daily. The public, what do the public want? What do victims want? The public want to see a police officer. The victims want a police officer to turn up, take a statement and investigate their crimes and hopefully arrest the perpetrators. And here we are with police chiefs involved in this utter nonsense. Look, I'll tell you the truth, Alice. There are people in the ethnic community that do not want to be police officers. They want to be nurses, they want to be doctors, social workers, probation officers. This obsession by these out-of-touch police chiefs and the Home Office to go round and almost go on their knees and beg the black community to join the police is very demeaning. And the public just want the police to police without fear or favour, and they don't give a damn whether it's a male or a female, black or white, who turns up to their crime and deals with their issue. They want them to turn up. And the caveat to all of this, Alex, because we keep talking about the same subject, I'm talking again on another TV channel in an hour's time, and I wonder why I do them. Yesterday, we were promised all these new police officers, yeah? In fact, it's one of the reasons the Labour Party got in. 17,000 we were put, 13,000 we were promised. Do you want me to tell you what they are? 5,000 special constables that only work 4 hours a week, 5,000 PCSOs. Most forces now are reducing them or getting rid of all their PCSOs, and 3,000 serving officers that are being moved from their already beleaguered department. And the final word on this one, which everybody seems to be missing, and it's the elephant in the room, we have had a massive influx of millions of people into Britain since 2009, and academics say that we need at least 18,000 new, fully warranted police officers. Where is the Home Secretary talking about that?
Right.
And these officers are going to be recruited, not now, in 5 years' time. Knife crime is going to be dealt with 10 years' time. It's a madness, Alex.
It is a madness. It's deeply, deeply concerning. I want to go back to a point you mentioned earlier about there being 4,000 gangs in Britain. You're talking about uncontrolled migration into this country, illegal migration. Lord knows who they're paying. People who seemingly set up a Turkish barbershop to launder their money because they're connected to what is now the biggest illicit trade in the world, people trafficking. But these people end up going into the black market, and these people end up being part of organised criminal gangs. How many? I mean, you're not going to have the answer off the top of your head, I'm sure, but what sort of proportion of the 4,000 gangs blighting Britain are actually British? How many of them have come from another country with the express purpose of actually creating a criminal money-making organisation in this country?
Many are not. People in Britain, the people we started this chat on about, police chiefs, the Home Office, leaders around Britain are frightened to talk about the elephant in the room. Migrants entering Britain, unknown, we don't know who they are. I have seen, because I'm told privately, the types of crimes they're committing: murder, rapes, child abuse, throwing acid at partners, committing crime at will. And the police won't tell you the truth, but they tell me the truth. They say, Norman, crimes being committed by migrants is out of control. We cannot do anything about it. And the courts, just like they do with people that are born and bred in Britain and commit crime, they release them day in and day out. We have what is commonly known as Britain on life support. I have never seen the criminal justice system so out of control. I've never seen so many inept police leaders. I've never seen a government so out of touch. And just so you know, on knife crime, which is my absolute passion, Alex, on Sunday, Alex, Adam Brooks, that you know, and myself, we are going to the public. It's time that the people that have got a privileged platform like I've got, and I'm a passionate campaigner, we're joining up and we're saying to the government, if you carry a knife on the streets without lawful authority or reasonable excuse, 5 years. And I'm one of Britain's most formidable campaigners within policing. I was their most formidable campaigner then. I'm a member of the public now, and I'm going to give my expertise, passion and fight to the public and those that are victims of knife crime, which happen daily and blight not only lives but communities that live in fear.
Right.
The time is for Britain's public to stand up and say enough is enough, and that's what Anna said.
I'm with you all the way, and I think a lot of this knife-carrying thuggery and violence that we have in Great Britain has been imported cultures as well. It's not baked into the British system that people go around with weapons, but you go to other countries and that's the dog-eat-dog societies a lot of these people are coming from. And then at the same time, you hear that Thames Valley Police has introduced equity training, not equality, equity. The outcomes have to be all the same. And forcing police officers to be trained in white privilege, microaggressions, ever since last September. It's disgusting. We're never going to get hold of law and order in this country if we have a two-tier system. Norman Brennan, thank you ever so much. Keep up your good work fighting against knife crime. It scares me to death, actually, living in London in this day and age. I was just in Brussels the last few days at a conference there. I used to live in Belgium, and I remembered, actually, it's pretty safe walking around parts of Brussels. Oh, they've got their problems in Molenbeek, but actually it's not like the kids on the line bikes with their weapons in London, I tell you that much. It is scary living in London in 2025. Right, going to take a short break now. Don't go anywhere. 2 more hours to come. See you in a moment.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino?
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there, my lovely things, commonsensical patriots, defenders of this good nation. Thank you for your company this Friday morning. This is Alex Phillips with you until 1 o'clock today, trying to breathe a bit of common sense into the world this morning, because there doesn't seem to be a lot of it around. It's at a premium, I'll tell you that much. We are going to be talking about more politics. Keir Starmer under fire for apparently watering down his pledge on setting up local grooming gang inquiries. We're going to be talking about motorists. What's the point in blimmin' well owning a car in this day and age with 20-mile-per-hour zones, low traffic neighbourhoods, taxes? It's just ridiculous. The cost of petrol at the pump. I mean, honestly, it's a nightmare. I tell you what, living in London with a car almost feels like masochism. It's impossible driving out of London boroughs into the safety of sensible driving without getting snapped by some sort of camera. We're also going to be talking about the ongoing furore of no bin collections in Birmingham. Rodents the size of dinosaurs. Whatever next. We're also going to be taking some of your calls and reading some of your messages. Let me know your thoughts on any of the stories we've been talking about today, whether it's the wanton criminality on our high streets. Why on earth were there so many vape shops and Turkish barbers popping up on random high streets in rural parts of Britain? Did no one ever have a think, this looks a little bit suspect? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call if you want to add your voice to the chorus and join me for a little bit of communal catharsis today. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a cheeky little voice note on WhatsApp, and I might be able to play that out later on in the show. You can hear your dulcet tones ringing out over the airwaves. You can text me 87222. Remember to type the word talk before you write a message. That way it reaches my computers here and doesn't sneak off to veil itself to presenters down at Times Radio or Talk Sport or Virgin. It gets in front of my eyes and my eyes only, and we're on X at talkTV. Right, let's have a little look now at Sir Keir Starmer being under fire for allegedly watering down his pledges on having 5 local inquiries into grooming gangs. He's now said that that will happen if needed. I'm joined now by Scarlett Maguire, former Labour Party advisor. Good morning, Scarlett. So he will fund more than 5 local inquiries into grooming gangs if needed. Are they needed?
So let's first of all, five local inquiries were promised, and that's what's going to happen, right? And then he's saying, and then there might be more. I mean, I can't quite understand what's going on. When Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions, he was the first person who took prosecutions against the so-called grooming gangs, right? He reopened closed cases that nobody would deal with and said, we've got to get them. And he and the chief prosecutor in the north work together to jail people, right? So actually Keir Starmer is completely determined to wipe out grooming gangs, and to say that he's watering it down is just wrong. What he's saying is, if more are needed, we can do more, but at the moment we've got 5 and we should be getting a lot of information out of those 5.
I mean, not everyone in the Labour Party agrees that he is doing enough. There's a campaign led by Lord Glassman, a Labour peer, demanding that the government launches a nationwide inquiry into grooming gangs. One assumes if it's happened in Rochdale and Rotherham, it's happening in plenty of other parts of the country. Is that what's needed after all this time? Really grabbing at the nettle and saying what has happened was an absolute atrocity. There is absolutely no words that do justice to the horrors inflicted upon thousands of little girls, targeted, frankly, for being white working-class little girls around the country by predatory, largely Pakistani gangs, and that there has been too much discomfort in talking about it, and we need to have that conversation.
The thing about a national inquiry is it will take years, right? And what these local inquiries are doing is what we need. What we need right now is we need justice and we need change. The inquiry into child sexual exploitation, which I was just looking at before I came here again, which is appalling reading and does deal with grooming gangs, but also deals with horrendous exploitation in boarding schools, in the church, the Christian church, Catholic, and internet sexual exploitation, came out with 20 recommendations, right? And these are what we need to do is we need to stop it from happening. And the first one, and the most important one, is that it is absolutely mandatory for anybody within child services or the police who finds out about child sexual exploitation to do something about it. Otherwise, it is a criminal offence. Now, this was not... when Alexis J came out with her recommendations, nothing was done. That was what was so awful. And this will actually go through in the next police and crime bill, which is coming up quite soon. What we need is we need to stop the gangs. That's what's most important. We need to protect the girls. And actually, if you read the Alexis J thing, you will see that it is not just the grooming gangs. It's that the appalling child sexual exploitation that's been going on in this country.
But I suppose what sort of marks out the rape gangs as different from the others is the fact that the racial element to this, the fact that these Muslim men were targeting white girls because they don't see them as high value. They think it's justifiable to treat and take these girls as slaves. It was based on their skin colour. It was based on the fact that they weren't Muslim, and that in itself was the reason why it managed to go on for so long, because people were deeply uncomfortable in acknowledging that. People would rather protect the concepts of multiculturalism and celebrate so-called diversity than actually say there are men who are fundamentally from other cultures who are preying upon our little girls. And that is what stands out the rape gangs against all the other forms of child abuse.
Actually, what I've just said is that Keir Starmer began the prosecutions, right? He wasn't frightened. He saw what was going on. He discovered what was going on. Some of them, before he came into became director of public prosecutions, were closed cases. He reopened them and said, we're going to prosecute these people. Of course it's terrible. What I'm saying is that what we need to do is we need to stop it. And actually there was an inquiry in Telford where they felt the young women involved, who are the most important people, felt that actually they were getting justice. And they were getting justice because it was a local inquiry that had them at the centre, and things began to happen. And what we can talk about a national inquiry that will report back in 10 years, right? In the meantime, what we need to do is we need to stop these gangs, and we need to make it absolutely plain that we're not going to put up with this. And that's why I said one of the things that happened is that when these girls went to the police, they did not believe them, right? And what I'm saying is that we need to make it a law that when somebody complains about something, when a young girl or boy complains that they've been sexually exploited, that actually somebody has to do something about it. And what we need to do is we need to change the culture. And I'm afraid that, given that Alexis Jay spent 7 years investigating what she did and came out with recommendations which are only being put into place now, I don't understand what a national inquiry is going to do. So what we need to do is we need to stop these gangs, right? We need law enforcement to stop them.
I couldn't agree more. We definitely do need to stop the gangs. It's ridiculous that they're still occupying communities in our country to this day. Let's talk now about Rachel Reeves, who's very often under fire. Poor old Rachel from accounts. She's now under fire for accepting tickets to go and see a play worth 265 quid, a free dinner and tickets to the National Theatre in London. She's previously gone to accept at the same theatre other tickets worth 276 quid. Why does Rachel Reeves see that it's up to that other people need to gift her trips to the theatre? Why is she unable to pay for this herself? Is she not self-aware that people are going to look at this and think that she's living a rather lavish lifestyle?
I think the first thing we have to get straight is this happened over a year ago, right? The tickets were to Nye, which was put on in March last year. And at that time, it was absolutely standard practice for ministers and shadow ministers to take that sort of hospitality. Still the National Theatre offers hospitality to people in government who all turn it down. A friend of mine was saying only yesterday that it was tough keeping on saying, no, I can't go to this play. So it has changed. But seriously, this isn't just Rachel Reeves. This will be, you talk to how many Tory ministers accepted tickets for theatre, for gigs, for anything. It's always been, and what's good is it's now stopped. And she won't take any more. But this goes back to March. This goes back over a year when everybody was taking them.
Do you think actually we make a bit too much of all of this? For somebody who, works very long hours in the centre of government, be it a shadow minister or a minister, goes to the theatre because they're in a privileged position, they're offered something, that actually, why should we be too bothered about that? Or do you think this really is a case of, being aware and being how, you know, alive to what the public perception of that is. I mean, should we be bothered at all?
Well, I having accused me of things, you now want me to go back on it.
No, I
love you, Alex. Dealing with you is so difficult.
I'm just thinking to myself. I don't know how outraged I am about Rachel Reeves getting theatre tickets. A lot of people are outraged. I'm not sure I actually share in the outrage personally. I mean, I've just come back from Brussels, where I was an MEP for 5 years, and if people think MPs get it nice in the UK, they should see the sort of lavish lifestyles of the European Parliament, and especially the unelected officials over there. It's ridiculous.
Aren't you offered things?
To be honest, yeah, I was, but because we're a Brexit Party MEPs...
No, I'm talking about
I should be so lucky. No one offers me anything. Every now and then I get a nice biro-written letter come through the post. That's about it. I mean, where are my offers? If anyone's listening, I really like Formula One, and my favourite band is James. Bring it on. I'm not elected to any sort of public office, and believe me, I'm not paid loads either. I could do with the handout. No, unfortunately, I'm not.
As I say, it was standard practice, and then people started minding about Taylor Swift, and since then government ministers have turned everything down. Whether one is right to be outraged or not, I don't know, but there is no question that people minded that politicians were getting freebies. I think it depends on who you are. I mean, I do think that if you're the Secretary of State for Culture, that you do have to go to plays. Right. You have to go to things. I think if and she also is doing sport, and she should be going to sport. And I don't think it's a freebie to say that the Minister for Education goes to see lots of schools, and probably the odd school play. But I think that it has now stopped because of the outrage. But I just want to make it clear that everybody was doing it until September.
I remember the good old days of duck houses and moats and the expenses scandal. I mean, blimey, that was quite something. Scott, before I let you go, I want to get your thoughts on another topic we're talking about today, which is essentially the lawlessness that seems to be gripping Britain at the moment. I don't know where you live, but where I am in London, the change of the street, my local high street, is incredible. Most shops now have one of their doors boarded up, so you have to enter and exit via the same door, because people are just going in and filling armfuls of products. You go into the Co-op and they've had to put meats inside these little Perspex plastic cases. And now we've got the front page of The Sun today, where essentially it's now become a thing around the country to just go into Greggs, help yourself to your chicken slice or your ham and cheese croissant and your sausage roll, and walk out. What has gone wrong now that we live in a country where once upon a time there was a sense of social shame about nicking stuff and shoplifting, and now everybody just seems to be on the take?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a few people. To be fair, whenever I have yet to see anybody doing it shopping. I think that what happened was that some years ago, not very long ago, is that the other government said that they weren't going to take shoplifting seriously, but below £200. And right. I think that was a disaster. And the people who really, really suffer are the small shopkeepers. I mean, the people who are running Greggs, who must just be terrified. What do? Do you stand up to the person and, you might get knifed, you might get hit, or do you just let it happen? And the problem is that the more often it happens, the more often it will go on. And we just have to have it so that the police come in and these people are arrested and dealt with properly.
I couldn't agree more. With all the facial recognition technology in this day and age, I think a part of this, the degradation of the sort of the social conduct, our contract as citizens with law and order, has been weakened by various things, including the leniency you're talking about. Also, I think, including mass migration. We've imported a lot of organised criminal gangs from other countries. But I think that there's something else going on here as well. And I can't quite put my finger on what it is. I think it must be to do with meting out justice and the fact that we've just got a little bit weak, like you said, on dealing with people. And the fact now, like you said...
I also think that trying not to massively overgeneralize, but teenagers, I mean, there are lots and lots of perfectly good teenage people who, as teenagers, did not behave well, and that's the problem. Is understanding that this has to be stopped. That if you make it difficult, by and large, it won't happen.
Have you ever shoplifted, Scarlett?
What did you say?
Have you ever shoplifted when you were a kid?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah.
What did you?
And I had to give it. I had to write to the person and give it back.
What did you nick?
A pair of shoes that I couldn't afford that I really wanted.
Oh, a pair of shoes! Blimey!
I know.
That's a big one, isn't it?
I know. No, it was terrible, and I was about 15 or something, and I regret it, and it was. But I think there is a thing about Tina is you just have to make it impossible, otherwise they do it.
I think you're right. You know, teenagers are sort of testing very often the limits of what they can get away with. They will put each other up to it. Go on, go into this and take that. Ha ha! It's the little excitable rush. And unless you've got parenting that's sort of really built in a sense of shame, you need the fear aspect. You need someone to not get away with it and them to be punished really harshly. Scarlett, it's been a delight talking to you today. Thank you ever so much for being on the programme. Scarlett Maguire, former advisor to the Labour Party, now coming up after the break. Oh, do you know what? I've got a car. I live in London. I don't use my car for London. No, it's my getaway vehicle, so I can get the hell out of London from time to time and go back into the real world. But getting out of London is an absolute nightmare. If it's not the 20-mile-per-hour zones where you're filling up your driving licence with points because you happen to be going 23, it's not even perceptible. You can't even tell you're going 23 miles an hour, not 20. It's impossible. Modern engine compression doesn't allow you to put a speed limiter down that low. It's so punitive. If it's not getting papped by a multitude of cameras out to seem to catch the ordinary driver while some sort of geezer in a white van is driving down the road smoking a spliff out the window, oh, never mind him, or some hooligan with a machete is going in and out of traffic on a line bike, never mind them. It's the low traffic neighbourhoods. It's the cycle lanes that aren't even used. It's the taxis. I mean, just owning a vehicle in this day and age makes you feel like you have to be a sadomasochist. We're discussing that with former Top Gear presenter Steve Berry after the break.
No, this is, as you say, it's deeply sinister, really. It's bad enough, I think, as an adult being talked about your pronouns all the time. So LinkedIn, for instance, now, the professional website for business connections, asks you to state your pronouns. There is a way to opt out of it, but it's not easy. But actually trying to get children to buy into this ideology is, exactly as you say, Kevin, deeply, deeply sinister. It's a form of brainwashing, isn't it? You do as we do, or you won't be able to compete in this competition.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is...
Labour says it backs drivers. Oh, it's not going to get rid of ULEZ. It's not going to scrap the 20-mile-per-hour zones. I'd say that their anti-car zones tell a very different story, but apparently they say there's no such thing as a war on motorists. Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander insisted in a speech last night that no serious person thinks that tradesmen are being asked to swap their van for a bus. Really? You want to speak to a white van man in the outskirts of London now dealing with ULEZ and ask him for his opinion. She said that she's focused on real problems, not invented ones. Well, let's speak to Steve Berry, who's a former Top Gear presenter. Steve, honestly, I actually hate owning a car. I actively hate owning a car in London. You can't park it, you pay through the teeth for everything. You're getting out of London's like walking through or driving through a minefield. You never know which camera's going to go off. You've got all the sort of yellow, crosshatch markings and the crazy drivers from other countries who don't seem to sort of understand what letting in a vehicle to prevent a pilot might look like. It's an absolute blimmin' disaster. Labour hate cars, don't they? Let's be real about this.
Yeah, I watched, well, I've lived in London and tried for 7 years and tried to drive a car and just gave up. It just gave up in the end. And that's me. I'm a motoring journalist. I've been a motoring journalist. I just gave up. But I was watching The Ipcress File with Sir Michael Caine, one of the greatest British films of the 60s. And his boss calls him in and he has to go to Admiralty Arch. And he just gets in his Ford Cortina outside his house, drives to Admiralty Arch, parks, gets out, doesn't even lock it. And I don't think the filmmakers thought anything of it when they made that little scene. But it almost made me weep for how easy it was to drive. I mean, I live in Manchester now, in the city centre. And like you said, I heard you earlier saying, you just don't bother driving in the city. I don't bother driving in Manchester. I cycle because it's just been deliberately, and it is deliberately, it's just been deliberately made so difficult that they just drive you, if you'll pardon the expression, to despair, in the hope that you'll give up.
I mean, I quite frankly have given up, and if I don't give up, I'm pretty sure they're going to force me to, because I'll end up with 12 points on my licence because I keep getting caught in these 20-mile-per-hour zones. Steve, I'm pretty sure, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, when I try and put the speed limiter on my car, because I've now got, a slew of points on my licence, not doing anything reckless or wild, just, I don't know, having the audacity of driving in and out of borough of London, I am so cautious. I am so cautious now when I drive, and yet it seems impossible to actually regulate speed at 20 miles per hour. I don't think modern engines are capable of doing it.
Well, you know what they're getting us ready for, don't you?
What?
Autonomous cars.
Oh, God.
They're getting us to the point where we're so annoyed that we just think, okay, do you know what? I can't be bothered driving. Driving was a joy. Alex, I know I don't look it, but I'm 60, right? I started driving over 40 years ago, and it was a pleasure and a delight to drive back then. It was a joy and a privilege, and it wasn't that expensive. I'm so old, the first motor vehicle, admittedly it was a moped, that I had to fill up with fuel. I'll never forget this. I had to push it to the station because it had no fuel in it, and it cost me 74 pence to fill the tank brim full. But of course, that vehicle that I used was a moped, and it had pedals and an engine, but it also had a number plate. Unlike the plague of mopeds, which is what they are, they're motorcycles, they're not cycles, that infest every British city, where people are just scooting along on a vehicle that's unregistered. And there's nothing the government dislike more than an unregistered vehicle, because it means that they can't send out the taxes, which is what they are, to the person who's registered with that identification. Well, like prisoners, a registration plate now on a vehicle is like the prison number that they make you hold up and have on your orange overalls. That's what it is. Do you know what I got busted for? I just got busted for, and no speed limiter could do this for you, for going in a bus lane. And it's a notorious bus lane in Manchester at Middleton that catches so many people out because, for some reason, and I can't imagine why, it's not the inside lane that's the bus lane, It's the outside lane. So you come out of the roundabout, you see a bus lane sign, you pull into the inside lane, you pull into the outside lane, they've got you. Because it's the outside lane that's the bus lane.
Yeah,
and is that why?
They
Is
do
it
it
deliberate?
deliberately. They want to catch you. They want to vilify motorists. They think that we're all there to basically pay money into the system. It's a stealth tax. Steve, thank you ever so much. I'm glad someone else shares my despair when it comes to driving. It's absolutely nightmarish. Let's do a quick phone call before we go to the break, because we've got Georgina in London who wants to talk about Peter Cardwell's interview with the lawyer representing Hamas. Hello, Georgina.
Good morning. Well, is it morning?
It is still. You've still got 31 minutes of morning, my darling.
Good morning, gorgeous girl. Right, I watched in horror yesterday Peter getting verbally attacked by Frank McGuinness. All Peter did was ask a viable question. Did Frank McGuinness agree with the Hamas being in the ECHR? Did he agree with what they stand for? He wouldn't answer. He deviated the question, but they do say, Alex, that attack is the best form of defence. So Frank McGuinness made it all about himself, which was not what Peter wanted. I want to know who's funding this solicitor. You know, I want to know that. But I do want to say that every pound that Frank McGuinness gets for representing Hamas represents a body. That's blood money. Because saying that Hamas is not a terrorist organisation is like saying Harold Shipman was a good doctor. It's absolutely disgusting. The whole world witnessed it fits him so they all witnessed those babies being paraded in front of Hamas sympathisers dancing, and children were involved in that. There were children. They were dancing, they were clapping. You know, that poor guy had to take his children, his dead babies back, and his wife. They gave him the wrong body. We look at the bigger picture every day, Alex. It's called the World Wide Web. You can get an unbiased view of Hamas on there.
Well, what really sticks in my core about this is they're going to be challenging legally the government on whether Hamas should be a prescribed organisation. It is, and it should stay that way. But we, the taxpayer, are going to be the ones footing the massive legal bill for the government in defending what should be an absolutely undisputable position. I am sick to death with the judiciary in this country being top dogs. I'm sick to death of them parading around their radical leftist viewpoints. I'm sick to death of them thinking that they have the right to not deport someone because of chicken nuggets, not deport someone else because of their right to a family life despite being a paedophile rapist. I'm sick to death of judges thinking that they stand above us, the people, because when judges stand above our politicians, when judges stand above the government, that is the way we have a voice through democracy. That's the government that we've elected to represent us. Nobody has voted for these judges or these Hugos and these Camillas. They disgust me. I am absolutely fed up with lawfare in this country. I'm fed up with what the judicial systems around the West are doing just so they can seem all fancy and nice and self-righteous at their dinner parties. Oh, I'm glad I got that off my chest. Georgina, thank you, my darling, for your call. Right, we're going to go to a break now. When I come back, we're going to be talking about the Birmingham bin strikes. Rats the size of dinosaurs. People having to actually start burning their rubbish in the streets. No one can apparently get to the landfill. Every single appointment's been booked up. We're going to be talking to the Shadow Cabinet Member for Highways and the Environment for Birmingham City Council after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
You know, when I used to live in Nairobi in Kenya, one thing that you saw taking place a lot is people just setting fire to rubbish at the side of the road. I don't know why, but they were always doing it. It was gross, horrible, toxic fumes. There's bin bags full of horrible trash. It was just creating a conflagration as you drive your car to work. Well, now, you don't have to be in the developing world to see such a scene. You can just go to Birmingham because residents there are torching their own rubbish as bin bags are piling up, sparking fears of toxic fumes, exploding batteries, probably out of control fires. If it's not the burning of waste by the side of the road, which is some sort of horrible developing world country spectacle, it's rats the size of dinosaurs because the binnies have been on strike. Let's speak now to Councillor Timothy Huxtable, who is a Shadow Cabinet member for the Environment at Birmingham City Council. How bad is it, Timothy?
It's bad, Alex, and good morning. I've been out this morning in my own ward of Hall Green, and I was doing a radio interview next to a pile of bags, a mountain of black bags, which had just built up over the last 3 weeks. And the stench was awful. While we were doing the interview, we could hear rustling. We didn't want to explore that any further. And this is why I was calling for Birmingham to declare a public health emergency earlier this week. And the Labour Council didn't want to debate it. They cut short the debate. They stopped us from talking about it in the council chamber. You know, a complete lack of democracy, a complete lack of our right to talk about the most crucial issue that's affecting Birmingham today as we speak. With it being a lovely sunny day here in Birmingham, the stench is just getting worse and worse and worse.
Well, it is a public health crisis. Quite clearly it is a public health crisis. If you've got festering rubbish, dirty nappies, mouldy takeaways, Lord knows what else. I mean, look, everyone seems to be having a giraffe. They've seen that the bin bags aren't being collected, so like, oh, why not just lob my old sofa on the pile as well? It's become like mass fly tipping as people see the state of the streets.
Alex. Yes, I've actually seen them do it. And the latest information I've had is that we've got 21,000 tonnes, 21,000 tonnes of uncollected waste.
21,000 tonnes! That's it. How are they even going to collect it all when they do decide to get back to work? What is the complaint of the binnies? Why aren't they satisfied?
Basically, the Labour Council created a mess 8 years ago when they created a role which they're now trying to get rid of. So literally the mess, the rubbish has been created by Labour's own action from 8 years ago, which they're now trying to clear up, which has resulted in this industrial action.
So what do they do? What do they do? Be more specific. What have they done 8 years ago that means the binnies aren't working today?
8 years ago, to avoid industrial action, that's the irony, they created a waste recycling and collection officer role. This is unique. No other local authority in the country has created such a role, and we've now been told that it is likely to be in breach of equal pay legislation.
Oh, it's the old equal pay legislation again, is it? That seems to be bankrupting councils up and down the country. Absolutely ridiculous. This is the price one pays for wokery, ladies and gentlemen. If you're spending so much money on having everything sort of funneled through the prism of equity, guess what? Your bins aren't going to be collected. It's absolutely disgusting. I mean, what sort of things are residents able to do to deal with this situation? If that was my street, if I was stepping out of my front door to, you know, feast my eyes on some of the scenes I'm seeing, oh, look, some scumbags just chucked a mattress into the mix. There's always somebody who has to, you know, take the proverbial, isn't there? I mean, what can people do? Because my understanding is when people are trying to do the right thing and get to landfill sites or get to the recycling centre and it's all booked via appointments, understandably, there's no appointments left.
No, and even though the opening hours have been extended twice since this bin action started, there's still no spaces to book. We have mobile household waste centres that come round on a daily basis, but I've been to some of these, and it's been absolute chaos. And at one point, there were so many black bags being dumped at this mobile household waste centre, they blocked in children in a children's play area in a park that was next to where the waste centre was actually located.
What?
I know.
You are shadow cabinet member for the environment, right? So what do you think needs to be done?
Right. First of all, declare a public health emergency. Second, protect those bin workers who want to work, allow them to work and protect them from any intimidation or harassment they are facing. Give the unions a deadline for accepting the offer that's on the table. If not, take the right action. Call in help from other councils. Lichfield, a Conservative control council, have already offered to help out Birmingham with additional waste collection services. Take up those offers.
Well, why has that not been taken? Why on earth, if Lichfield's saying, look, you know, we can see that you're in a bit of a pickle, your streets look horrible, we're happy to send our binnies round to collect that for you, why would the answer be no?
I don't know whether, in fairness, whether the answer is no. I know that Lichfield have offered that help. And also what we need to do is to scrap the rat tax. Because last year, Labour imposed a rat tax on the people of Birmingham.
A rat tax?
A rat tax. If you want our pest control services to come out to get rid of rats, you now have to pay for it. They introduced that a year ago. And what has happened since? There's been an explosion in the rat population in Birmingham.
I'll tell you what goes quite well with getting rid of rats, and that's having a cat. They seem to do a good job. I've got one. She used to stay with my parents actually for a few months because I was off doing lots of trips, and ever since she was enjoying her sort of sojourn in Gloucester, the mice and the rats have been back on my little street in London. But she's back in operation. She's back in circulation, I'm pleased to say. But I mean, this is so frustrating. Residents must be absolutely up in arms, and it's no doubt, you know, days away from something really appalling happening.
Absolutely, and it comes back to we need to act and need to act fast and actually get round to declaring a public health emergency. And I haven't seen rats as big as dinosaurs, but I have seen rats as big as cats. So, you know, I would not like some of the cats in the neighbourhood taking on some of these rats. Now I've seen the size of these rats.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, my little cat probably would struggle with something the size of some of the rats you've been growing there in Birmingham. It's absolutely appalling. I feel very sorry for people of Birmingham having to live amongst that utter filth. It is appalling. They should hang their heads in shame at the council. They've not dealt with this. And good old Lichfield, I do hope that Lichfield is the knight on a shining bin truck who goes to the rescue of the good old residents of Birmingham. Thank you ever so much for joining me. We're going to take a short break now, and after I come back, I want your thoughts. I want you to join me in conversation. 0344 499 1000 is the number to dial. It's your standard network rate. You can talk to me about rats the size of dinosaurs. You can talk to me about the lawlessness of Britain. You can talk to me about the vape shops, the Turkish barbers, all now finally being shut down. Well, not all of them, only a tiny handful, frankly, by immigration officers and law enforcement, because guess what? They were fronts for money laundering. Who'd have thunk? You can talk to me about whether Rachel Reeves is right to be taking all these theatre tickets, living it large at the National Theatre. Can she not afford to pay for it herself? All of that is up for grabs, so throw in your 2-bit. 03444 99 1000 is the number to dial if you want to be patched through to the studio live on air. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message and indeed leave me a voice note that I'd be happy to play out on air. 8722 is the number to text. If you're going to use that route, make sure you write talk before your message. That way it comes into my studio here and doesn't get lost in someone else's programme. We are on X at talkTV, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you after this break.
we should have racist policies for hiring police because these people come to this country and don't learn English. Doesn't seem the right priority at all.
Julia, it's not racist. It's perfectly legal under the Equalities Act 2010 to have positive action.
It's racist. It might be legally racist, but it's racist.
Well, how is it racist, Julia? Giving somebody else, giving them the opportunity to apply, helping them.
If you discriminate between people based on the colour of their skin, that's racism.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, it's the time of the show where I get to speak to you lovely people. I love it when you call in. It's really nice having a bit of a chin up because if you hadn't noticed, I'm sitting in this here studio all on my lonesome. That's right, I've somehow got to jabber on for 3 hours and keep you guys entertained. Well, you can do some of the heavy lifting, can't you? Let's speak now to Ashley, who is in London. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, Alex. Good morning.
Good morning.
A couple of points. I mean, firstly, I was sitting in the car listening to the interview with that barrister yesterday with Peter. And in some ways, I look at it and think, I'm pleased he did that because I hope people just listen to this guy and realise what he is from the way he spoke to Peter and the way, just his general attitude. He came on with an agenda. The question I had with him is that Peter was asking him about, and he was trying to deflect from his view. He's representing his client. But from what I understand, there's loads of communication online from the 7th of October onwards about his personal views about it, which he was reported a few times, and nothing actually happened. It's very clear that where his loyalties lie. He's a communist. And we know which side, the Corbynistic side of politics. It's clear that a barrister doing something for nothing. I mean, he must have his heart involved in something to do that.
I mean, this is the thing. I mean, look, I don't particularly fancy defending that man, but I'm going to. Which is, when it comes to ne'er-do-wells having legal representation, it is part of the British justice system. And I don't think when a barrister, and I'm not talking about this man in particular, but in general in the legal profession, when a barrister says, all right, my job is to provide a defence for Fred West, then it doesn't mean that they're best mates with Fred West and love Fred West and support everything that Fred West has ever done, but it is a facet of having a proper legal system. And so, if someone's going to pay for to challenge the fact that Hamas is a proscribed organisation, then I suppose one might argue it needs its day in court.
Yes and no. I mean, I think that they said that they can't take any money because of who they are and that they're doing it in effect. I think the lawyers said that they're doing
right?
Yeah, I think the lawyers said that they are undertaking and they're not taking payment, and they didn't elaborate on that. And I've never known lawyers to work for nothing in my professional experience, right? So my point is that something like that, when you've got payment terms of what they possibly have or don't have, you have to ask the question. So I don't think there's any doubt about what side it falls on. But the point I'm making, look, I'm a Jew. I'm a not particularly religious person, but over the last couple of years, I mean, even this week, right, Facebook is an example. People like him create what we're having at the moment about rewriting history about us Jews, right? So we're having things coming on going, oh, the Jews have been kicked out of all these countries. There has to be a reason for it. And you know where this is all coming from, right? It's like, oh, well, someone couldn't, it must be right. Let them go home. Well, I'm fifth generation here. Where do I go, right? And people like this and these type of situations and what's happened with the war, it's creating for us here, we can disagree with certain parts of the world. We can also agree that, from the start of the outset of this current situation on the 7th of October, there's something that needs to be sorted out there. I think even as a Jew, we accept that, and something needs to happen. Everyone wants peace, right? But you can't have we are being attacked left, right, and centre, and we're being bullied online.
This is the thing, when words are used such as the Zionist oppressor, and this is part of the 106-page document that's been submitted to Yvette Cooper by this legal practice, urging the Home Secretary to depart from Britain's, and I quote, morally and legally indefensible policy of siding with the Zionist oppressor. If anyone's oppressing anyone, it's Hamas suppressing their own people. Ashley, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's speak now to Jen, who is in Devon, the gorgeous West Country. Hi there, Jen.
Hello. It's quite simple, Greg. Take your stuff out on show, put it behind the counter with the girls that's serving. They can't get at it. You've got to ask for what they want. I used to work in Paynton in a jeans shop at Levi's, and they were £35, and I worked for £1.05 an hour for 69 hours a week, and if we lost some jeans, he used to take it out of wages.
Really? Blimey.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the other problem, isn't it, with today's high streets? Because especially the big chains have made a very cynical decision, right? Especially the supermarkets. They've decided that, you know, that by bringing in self-checkout, they're going to save money on paying people to do that job. They're going to save money on then having to pay pensions for those people. And instead, they're going to have a help yourself, scan your own items policy. And they know that there will be people who aren't putting things on the weighing scales, who aren't bothering scanning this, that and the other, who instead are just walking out and not paying their fair share. And they've priced that in. They've decided they'll price that into putting up the prices for us customers who do follow the law. Yeah.
Self-service is self-service is stealing.
Well, self-service checkouts drive me mad. I mean, only because half the time they don't work.
Well,
I used to be a checkout girl. I know how to scan a barcode. I don't know what's wrong with the self-service ones, that they don't seem to read them properly.
I get confused with it, and I'm coming up for 82.
Yeah. Well, it was nice. It was human interaction. It's what made us a society. Going into a shop and speaking to someone behind a checkout, that was what paid me my first car and my driving lessons. I used to work at Safeway back when that existed as a checkout girl.
That's right.
Yeah. Proper stuff.
Conversing to your public that's buying your stuff and being happy. I go to Aldi. They're great.
Other supermarkets are available.
They are absolutely great.
Yeah, they do a good bottle of champagne for quite cheap.
A good day, and they smile and say thank you.
That's true, actually. I didn't think of that, but they don't tend to do self-checkouts at all. And plus, for some reason, I don't know what it is about them. They have a system where they throw your shopping through the checkout at lightning-fast speeds, and there's no bit at the end for it to, you know, you're there sort of like, whoa, trying to pack your own bag like a lunatic.
I live in Paynton, and they're absolutely lovely, all of them. They smile, or when they're filling the shelves up, they speak to you. They're wonderful.
Yeah, I used to like my job as a checkout girl. And actually, if you are someone who goes shopping and you're faced with someone behind a checkout,
that's right.
Do smile, do say hello, because it does make your day. Because otherwise, you're sitting there by yourself, just you and the conveyor belt for company. And when people go past on the mobile phone and don't even make eye contact and just, you know, zap their card, it makes your day very boring and miserable. It really does change someone's day, having a smile, saying hello and saying thank you. Thank you ever so much for your call. Jen in Devon. Let's speak now to George, who is in Leeds. George, how are you doing?
Morning, Alex. How are you?
I'm all right, my dear. How are you?
I'm immensely frustrated. I'm sick and tired of this country. I've decided that me and my family are going to move abroad. We've just had enough.
Where are you going?
The road. Luckily, my wife is Polish, so we bought some property over there a couple of years ago, and we're now sort of in the process of doing what we can to let my daughter finish school and then, you know, make the move, because there is zero future in this country. I see degradation everywhere, in services, in infrastructure, in just attitudes to people, you know.
And what's gone wrong? Because, look, I'm with you. It does feel like, to me, if you're a law-abiding citizen trying to go about and you work hard, you're not one of these people who's off sick with mental health, you know, that you're going in, you're putting in the shift, you're trying to obey by the law, you're the one who's punished. You're taxed to high heavens, you're vilified for driving a car, everything you do is wrong, it's just miserable, and yet some oik who came in the country yesterday wielding a machete is treated as if he's been beatified, as if he's the second coming.
Well, I think this goes back 30, 40 years when we've had the influence of the left and the far left, believing that, you know, there is no root cause to a crime, that it's a social problem. There is no root cause to infrastructure. It's all the problem of something else. And this is pervasive throughout the society at the moment. It's always somebody else's fault.
Oh, yeah, I mean, you say the left, but I remember good old David Cameron and his hugger hoodie. It's not their fault they're being nasty. It's not their fault. No, it must be society who hasn't looked after them. The problem is we look after these people too much.
Absolutely. But, I mean, again, I remember getting a clip around the ear from a copper and being dragged home when I was out and about in my early teens. Could you imagine the newspaper headlines and the story's coverage, wall-to-wall coverage on the BBC, if a copper did that now?
Well, I don't know, probably depends what your skin colour was. Certainly if you're from a minority and a copper had the audacity to physically apprehend you, it would probably become headline news with some sort of dodgy barrister representing you. George from Leeds, thank you ever so much for your call. I kind of share your despair, but don't you worry, I'm going to stay till the last and defend this nation. No Poland for Alex. I'm going to stay and make sure that things get better because they can. They can, and we'll make sure they will. Let's speak to Herbie, who's in Harrow. Hi there, Herbie.
Yes, good morning, Alex. Regarding the grooming gang, being cancelled as regarding inquiry, I think they're sweeping the evidence under the carpet so that the truth doesn't come out of actually who's involved with it all. I think this is what they're scared of. In fact, we're opening up a big can of worms that's going to really blow the place apart.
I mean,
anything else.
There is a suspicion there that at the very least it will show that certain people just turned a blind eye because they didn't want to have to face the challenge against multiculturalism. They didn't want to have to set a cat amongst the pigeons when it comes to their beloved diversity. That it was far easier to just go, these girls aren't worth anything. No one's going to believe them anyway. I mean, how sick are we as a society when you read some of the court transcripts of what these girls were being put through? I cannot bear to think about it, and I certainly can't say it on the airwaves at 11:58. But when you read some of the court transcripts, at the bestial, disgusting, perverted, satanic behaviour of these rape gangs, and people go, oh well, easier just to ignore it and not talk about it. What is wrong with you? That's what I have to say to these people.
Yeah, but Alex, the problem is that if the boot was on the other foot and it was white people, going for Muslims and Pakistani children, what would the outcry be then?
Oh, could you imagine? Could you imagine? Because this is racially motivated. There is no element of this that is not racially motivated. Those rape gangs deliberately targeted white, non-Muslim girls because they were white, non-Muslim girls.
Yep. It was a golden opportunity for them to say we've broken our rules and we're going for the white girls. To me, it's racist as well, as far as I'm concerned, that they've done this.
Of course it is.
And I think it's time that this government woke up and did something for the nation and for the people, and certainly for these girls, to give them justice that they deserve, because they will be carrying that for the rest of their lives, Alex.
Herbie, I could not agree more. Herbie in Harrow there passionately saying it's about time people stood up for our women and our girls. Right, we're going to take a short break now. When I come back, we're going back into the world of politics with Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. He is coming up after this break. See you in a moment.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field." put your foot down, this rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet, and it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich, don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Talk. This is the home of common sense, and this is Alex Phillips trying to inject a little bit of common sense and pragmatism into the world today on this rather pleasant-looking Friday. I tell you what, I cannot wait to finish up in an hour's time and go home and just sit in the sun. I hope it's hot enough. I don't know. It's blimmin' freezing in this studio. You'd think I was in the Arctic right now. But I hope it's T-shirt weather. I cannot wait to feel the warm rays of UV light on my skin. Oh, it's been a long winter. That is after I've taken my producer Ted to Borough Market to show him where you can buy goose eggs. Very good goose eggs. I don't know if you've ever had one. They're hard to come by. You know, apparently geese only start laying in sort of February and do it for a couple of months. So if you ever come across a goose egg this time of year in spring, go get it, because about 10 months of the year they're not available, and I love them. Sorry, I don't know where that came from. Ricky will be in a minute, my editor, telling me off for talking about food. I'll see his ominous presence appear in the glass there. He'll look at me sternly through the window. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. Right, after I've waffled on about absolutely nothing, let's get back to politics, shall we? Because I'm joined now by Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism. Mark, fantastic, always fantastic having you on the show. A man who doesn't hold back and knows a lot about a lot and has some very sensible political ideas. Are you as fed up with the country as many of my listeners are? I had Herbie calling in before the break, and then before him a man going, I'm just going to move to Poland, I just can't live here anymore. And that sentiment is being echoed. Everyone I speak to just says, why? We're being taxed to smithereens. When you look out of the window, there's nothing but crime. You got the front page of the Sun today, people just helping themselves to Greggs and just wandering off with food. Certainly the street where I live in London, half the shops are boarded up to try and stop the looting. What is going on? Why are things degrading at such an alarming rate?
Yeah, great question. I mean, these are pretty depressing times, aren't they, Alex? I think I heard you right just before the news that you're going to stay around and fight, and so am I too, because I think these things can be turned around. I was born in the early 1970s, so I don't remember the 70s that well. But it feels like we're living through the 1970s again, that Britain is broken, that almost nothing works as it should. The economy is incredibly sluggish, notwithstanding the slightly more optimistic than expected numbers we've just had today. Public services are poor and cost an absolute fortune. And I think underlying it all is that we have a government and a political establishment, I'm not trying to make just a partisan point against the Labour Party, that is completely out of touch with the basic aspirations, hopes, fears, desires, dreams and thoughts of the British electorate. Completely detached. There's this sort of metropolitan, liberal thinking elite who would prefer, frankly, police officers to go on diversity training courses than to stop shoplifters or people stealing things in Greggs. So we've got a government and a governmental system that seems completely incapable of aligning policies with the actual... Little wonder that so many people are so disillusioned.
I mean, is it, at the end of the day, what it comes back to is it's the economy stupid? Because we've got a population that is ageing. We've got a population that's growing due to unfettered immigration. Some would argue that we need the unfettered immigration to manage the ageing population and for people to come over here and do jobs. Although when you look at people joining their spouses on degree courses and 10 dependents for every carer for Zimbabwe, you have to wonder quite what is going on. But is it the fact that, you know, we simply have not kept up when it comes to building enough prison places, with having enough police in the police forces, with having enough hospitals, enough doctors, enough nurses, enough social care, and that at the root of all of this is because, frankly, we're in decline, and when you start to decline, it leaves a fecund ground within which crime to take seed, in which for social degradation to happen.
Yeah, I think that's broadly a fair analysis. When several things start to go wrong, several other things start to go wrong, and before you know it, everything's going wrong all at once. I don't think it's quite as reductionist as could we just turn the economy round, and if we could only get sort of, I don't know, 2 or 3% growth a year, everything would be solved, because everything is basically going awry at the same time. And I think underlying that is that the state is trying to do far, far too much. And the core things that we would expect it to do, it is not doing at all well. And it needs to get back to the core principles, the basic straight down the line stuff that people expect of their government, which would be, for example, combating crime and protecting our borders. You would think those would be the first two things. We can't even get those right. So everything is spinning out of control. The government is way too big. I mean, we are heading quite quickly to 50% of GDP, that is to say 50p in every pound, being government expenditure. Utterly ludicrous size of government. To give your viewers and listeners a comparison, Alex, the former Soviet Union was about 70% of its economy was government expenditure. So we're not a million miles short of what the Soviet Union got to. And the fastest growing economies in the world tend to have a government sector of, let's say, around about 20%.
Wow.
So in terms of the size of our government, we have positioned it, if anything, slightly closer to the Soviet Union than the fastest growing economies in the world. We've got to get out of that. But that does mean, I think, that politicians and the electorate need to face up to the reality that that means a lot of things that the government does now we won't be able to do in future. The welfare.
I don't think we'd,
for example.
I don't think we'd miss having a good old doging here in the UK. How much of this is down to social cohesion and the changes to the fabric of society as well? Because it strikes me when I look around big urban areas and the people who sort of go around and just drop litter on the floor, you know, ride their bikes on the pavements, small little irritations, yes, but they don't tend to be people from this country. They haven't sort of signed up. It's not, the social accord in this country isn't innate within them. They have no ownership or loyalty to this nation. They're from perhaps a different culture where back at home people just lob rubbish in the sewerage system and don't care. And that they don't have any sort of emotional connection to this land, and people don't know each other. That sense of social shame tends to be watered down when you live in a street where neighbours don't even, you know, make eye contact, let alone exchange pleasantries, let alone stand up and defend one another.
Yeah, I think all of those are really good points. And unfortunately, as the system in general tends to break down, people lose faith in it and generally start to think, well, why should I abide by the rules? This is often an analysis made of tax systems, that if you get the impression, rightly or wrongly, that vast numbers of other people are avoiding tax and not paying their way, you're much more minded to do so yourself. Why should I abide by the rules of the system if many others are ducking them? So social solidarity starts to fall away as well. I think we've seen that particularly in these accusations, very well-founded accusations, in my view, of a two-tier justice system, that people don't actually think that all of us are treated equally and fairly under the law. I mean, just the other day, we've seen West Yorkshire police don't bother applying if you're white. They don't put it in quite such terms, but that's almost what they say. We've seen, I mean, unbelievably tough sentencing handed out to those involved in any of the disorder around the Southport incident. Hugely heavy sentences handed out. but we don't seem to be able to tackle the grooming gangs inquiry, which, by the way, isn't just about the gangs. It's about potentially vast numbers of public servants who colluded, covered it up, or looked the other way. We're not willing to open any of those cans of worms. So once people start to feel the system is not fair, it's not even-handed on who gets what or who's treated how, then you actually start to get real social degradation. People just stop caring. Why should I play by the rules?
Right.
Why should I play straight? Why should I play fair?
Yeah, we end up in a doom loop. I'm glad you brought up the grooming gang inquiries, because that is really at the heart of this, isn't it? It's because people don't want to ask the difficult question. They don't want to say that there's been any culpability of officials, perhaps partisan officials, who turned a blind eye because politically it was more expedient to do so, that they don't want to discover the smoking gun at the root of all of this, which is that people in positions of power who are supposed to be protecting the vulnerable in society were doing completely the opposite because it was uncomfortable for them to do so. And that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, here are some numbers to conjure with. We're spending, I think now, well over £200 million on the COVID inquiry. Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be an investigation into what went on, but this inquiry seems to be completely loaded towards we should have locked down harder, faster, firmer. We have £5 million on the table, 1/40th of that amount, for what one might argue is the most grotesque distortion of our justice system and our ability to protect vulnerable people in the last century or two. £5 million on the table. If you want to carry out a bit of a local inquiry, you know, drop a line to Jess Phillips, we'll see what we can do. Not being taken seriously at all. And Alex, I suspect you're right, either consciously or subconsciously. There are two fears here. One is, if we get to the bottom of this, I suspect that we will find dozens, hundreds of public officials in all sorts of different roles. They might be politicians, they might be social workers, they might be police officers, they might be council officers who, if they didn't collude, looked the other way, didn't want to tackle it. So hundreds and hundreds of people who work for the state would be in the firing line. I think the government's very reluctant to open that can of worms, even though it needs to be opened. And secondly, I suspect you're right also in what you just implied, or I inferred, that the real problem here was the way that sort of diversity, equality and inclusion has become a mind virus, that we no longer know the difference between right and wrong. We are so terribly conflicted about this might look bad, it might be considered racist, it might not be considered sensitive enough to talk about the Pakistani community. So those two things, I think, would come to light if we had any form of proper inquiry at all. If we can't have a proper inquiry at all because the government seems minded to make sure that we don't, we've got to keep talking about it, because this needs unravelling. It is a cancer at the heart of the British state and establishment. And we need to completely change the way our public officials think to ensure that there is no repeat of this ever again.
Oh, well, don't you worry about that, Mark Littlewood, because this government wants to roll out that abysmal programme on Netflix into all schools. Oh, yes, that adolescence thing, because guess what? It's comfortable when it's a 13-year-old white kid who's supposed to be the one killing and abusing girls. Oh, yeah, we can all talk about that as if our society is riddled with all of these little incels committing horrific crimes. I can't remember any such case. And yet he wants it played to schools around the country. This is just diversionary tactics. He loves pointing the finger at people when it's the white working classes. He wouldn't dare do the same and say, right, people need to have played at school to them what's gone on with the grooming gang. So if you worry that there might be a girl who's fallen victim to this, you can make sure that she has a voice.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alex. And, you know, it could be a diversionary tactic. Similarly, it could actually be what I think a psychologist would call displacement, that you face problems so big at governmental level. People are often like this in their personal lives as well. You face problems so big that you can't deal with them at all. So you go and find some other very small problem to distract you and try and tackle that and console yourself that you're sorting things out. This whole fuss about adolescence. I mean, I've watched it. It's a very, very good series, actually. I mean, I thought it was brilliantly made, and I thought it raised some interesting issues, not just about incels, but about how the entire state authorities in this particular film basically let down a white working class family. There's quite a few angles to it. But the idea that in our politics at the moment, we are obsessing about a fictional drama series, I think tells you all you need to know about our political class not actually facing up to the reality of the problem. I mean, I'll give props actually to the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, who said, no, I haven't watched it and I don't need to watch it to understand the problems of Britain. It's a fictional series. I don't need to watch it any more than I need to watch Casualty to understand what's going on in the National Health Service. But it's almost got a Last Days of Rome feel about it, hasn't it? This is just ludicrous indulgence to believe we can find the solutions to all of our problems by watching a Netflix series, a fictional Netflix series, however well made it might be.
Oh, it's absolutely infantile. To be honest, I found it pretty tedious. I must admit, I watched the 4 episodes and I was like, is that it? Is that what all the hype is about? What can we do then, Mark? You and I, we're going to stick around. We're going to defend this country. We're going to make sure Britain is great again. Where do we begin?
Well, I think you've got to call things out that are going wrong wherever you see them without fear or favour, and that requires a certain degree of bravery and courage, especially in the era of cancel culture, where if you slightly misspeak or put the wrong intonation on a word or use the wrong word, you get a complete pile-on. So it's going to require people of courage to say it as they see it without fear or favour, whether that's crime on our streets, the police force not doing their jobs, the complete breakdown of our asylum and immigration system and the laws around it. We've actually got to point out what's going wrong very clearly in very concrete terms. But crucially, more importantly than that, we've got to find some solutions, right? It's quite easy, sadly, in Britain today to point to a list as long as your arm of all the things that are going wrong. The economy's on the floor, asylum, immigration out of control, breakdown of neighbourhood relations, all of the rest of it. There's a huge, huge list. But how do we solve it? What's the solution to it? And I think that's what we've got to set our mind to. And I think we've got to completely reset the entire way that British government works. It's out of control at the moment. We have, Alex, 444 quangos.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
Independent arm's length bodies who are basically running the country, much more than the politicians are, who are, to some degree, seem sometimes only to be there for show. We've got to get rid of all 444 of those. We've got to return direct power and responsibility to the politicians we elect, rather than allowing them to duck these issues. We've got to put them in full control and full charge. And we've got to restore parliamentary democracy. You and I were both on, I think, the same side of the Brexit referendum, where we wanted to take back control. But enough to take back control from Brussels, we need the people of Britain and the Parliament of Britain to take back control from the Quango state, an increasingly active, politically active judiciary, who I think are now getting involved in politics rather than just enforcing the law. And I think our solution is to actually find a way back to the parliamentary democracy, the honest and open and free debate that we used to have in Britain. And if we can at least get that, I think there's a road out of this nightmare.
I think basically we've got to bring back accountability. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Mark Littlewood, Director of Popular Conservatism, thank you ever so much for being on the programme. It is about accountability. And do you know what? I was just thinking when Mark was talking there, this might not go down well with all residents of Birmingham listening to this, and I apologise, but maybe some of you might agree. There's a problem. Your bins aren't being collected, right? It's horrible. That's not your fault. People should be doing that job. You pay your council tax for people to do that job. It's a public health crisis. But also, do you get the sense as well, what's gone on with the social contract in this day and age? What's gone on with moral agency and individual responsibility? Because where I live in London, if they suddenly turn around and said, we ain't going to collect your bins for the next 2-3 weeks, I would be thinking to myself, right, I better make sure I reduce the amount that I'm putting into the bin, that I start to be a little bit more clever or conscientious about the way I am doing things when it comes to the amount of waste I'm creating and how I dispose of it, that I want to play my part in making sure that my street stays as clean as possible. And I'm sure there are residents of Birmingham desperately trying to do this, who aren't chucking the mattress and the, you know, the rubbish sofa and the broken TV set on top of all the other festering delights on the streets. That there are people actually going, I'm actually going to try and reduce my consumption or reduce the amount of waste, and where there are piles of bin bags, I'm going to do what I can to make sure things are properly tied up, that you don't get all the rats sniffing around, perhaps even, you know, try and clean things up in your street. What's happened to the social contract and individual responsibility? I'll tell you what's happened to the social contract and individual responsibility. A lot of people in this country don't actually care for this country. They don't care for this country, probably because they're not from this country. And I think that has a huge amount to do with a lot of stuff. When it's yours and you've paid taxes into it and your parents paid taxes into it and your grandparents laid down their lives and fought in world wars to defend it, you want to fight for it. You want to protect it. You realise that it is something worth putting a bit of time and an effort into preserving and helping build that prosperity and helping to maintain social cohesion. But if you turned up as an economic unit and you're sitting there getting the full sort of delights of the state, you don't speak the language, in the country you've come from, chucking litter about the place is a national sport, then you're probably not going to suddenly get to Britain and think, I'm going to do my best. Oh, look, you know, there's a load of rubbish out on the street. What can I do to help to alleviate this crisis? Because like, when I'm seeing all these pictures coming in from Birmingham, yes, there's the black bags, which is supposed to be collected by the binnies, but what's with all these mattresses and nasty furniture? What's with all the other detritus and rubbish that's being chucked onto the pile? Who's doing that? People who don't care about this country, people who have a feckless, reckless approach to life in Britain, and they're to be as held accountable, frankly, as the binmen who are not doing their jobs. People exacerbating the situation, people who don't care, selfish, nasty people. Right, sorry, had to get that off my chest. When I come back, it's the opportunity for you to get stuff off your chest, because it's the moment of the show that we hit up the phone lines. The number to call is 03444991000. That is charged at your standard network rate. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp or to leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. You can text me, 87222 is the number to do that. And remember to write the word talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV, and I'm back and waiting to hear from you after this.
And what you're trying to do by saying that is you're trying to fix me, you're trying to associate me with my client. There is a very well-established
representing them, Frank. You're representing them. You've decided to this is a conversation. I'm not going to be told whether I can talk or not talk. You've decided to represent them.
So you've invited me to talk over me because you're afraid of what I have to say, is that right?
I'm not afraid of what you have to say, but you're saying that I'm associating you with them.
You seem afraid. You seem afraid.
Afraid? We're having a conversation, and I'm asking you...
Well, at the bar, we tend to let each other speak. Is that not the convention?
I'm not a barrister, I'm an interviewer.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I have just got to read this message out. Right? This is brilliant. I was talking about people doing their bit, you know, as citizens of Birmingham to try and help alleviate the catastrophe, the public health crisis of the lack of bin collections, and that actually we should all have a degree of social responsibility and belonging to where we're from and wanting it to be clean and nice and pleasant. Well, Mark from Birmingham says this. Hi, Alex. The worst rat infestation I ever saw in over 20 years in the trade was in Birmingham at a waste site. The entire site was moving. The rats were running into people's gardens all down the street. The noise of the hundreds of rats crawling through the rubbish was as if you were in a car and had rain falling on the ceiling. We used air guns, terriers and bait to get on top of it. On the first day, we had 2 hours on site. I shot over 200 rats in 2 hours. We were filling the bins to the brims with the dead rats we had killed. There you go. That's one approach, I guess. Or you could just bring in the Pied Piper. Right, let's go to the phone lines and speak to Andrew, who's in Hertfordshire. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, it's a really cracking half hour. You and Mark were outstanding.
Oh, thank you.
Really good, really top job. And make sure you take your team out for a glass of cider today. They asked me to ask you that.
What my team asked? Was that Alicia putting in the call for the cider? She's hard getting that one to the cider house, I tell you. Every time I'm like, do you want to go for a glass of cider? Oh, I've got to go shopping. Oh, I'm meeting my friend at Selfridges. It's like, come on, Alicia. Anyway, right, so cider aside, so to say, what is on your mind?
Yeah, well, the country took a step in the wrong direction under Blair, where Mandelson says we're going to rub their noses in diversity. And at the same time, the Metropolitan Police Force, in a review, changed its name to a service, and the Parcel Service became the Parcel Force. And that's led on to now, when you've got young girls who've been sexually assaulted and abused, and no one cares. And that, what we have to do is find something where the government is exposed, and it's this, get a petition together and get 20, 30 million to sign it on that petition page. Because this isn't funny anymore. Jess Phillips every morning gets up, looks at her daughter and says, don't worry, love, you're okay. But there's a girl somewhere who's getting in a minicab this morning, and all I can say to her is the first inch is going to be the worst. Society is broken down.
Society is broken down in many respects when you can't tackle these issues. And what concerns me the most about Jess Phillips, and she might have a great surname, but I'm no fan of hers. We always used to get doubled up together on interviews when I was an MEP, and she's not particularly nice, if I'm honest with you. Do you remember her election campaign? And she had a torrid time, quite frankly, in Yardley in Birmingham. During her campaign, her staff were targeted and harassed and threatened. At the count itself, they were jeering men. Frankly, some of the things that she had to face were pretty blimmin' awful. And I felt sorry for her. I did. Up until the point I heard what she said in an interview. She didn't want to point out that this was the pro-Hamas MEPs and their baying mob of would-be terrorists all trying to intimidate her election campaign. She didn't want to point the finger at the fact that what happened in Yardley in Birmingham during that campaign was coming from a particular subset of society. No, she did what she always does. She just blamed men in general. She blamed men. Oh, it's the fault of men.
Yeah, but the point with her is she plays the Joe Cox card all the time. But actually, that Joe Cox would roll in her grave at the way Phillips has abandoned women. She is useless, gutless, and spineless.
Well, the memory of Joe Cox must not be sullied. I mean, well, terrible what happened there. But no, I do think you cannot. If you're in charge of safeguarding, you've got to get real. You've got to be able to call out the truth for what it is and see who needs safeguarding and from whom. And I just don't think that that conversation is being had. Thank you ever so much for your call, Andrew in Hertfordshire. Let's speak now to Colin, who's in Wakefield. Hi, Colin.
Hi there. Are you all right?
Yeah, not too bad, my darling. How are you?
I'm okay. Just a couple of things. The bake and steal from Greg's. Years and years ago, I always remember, because a lot of these national stores do employ police officers for national security. And he once said to me that while ever it's cheaper to let the goods walk out of the door, you'll never stop shoplifting.
Right.
You can bring all the rules, all the policies you want, but, for example, it's cheaper to let the £3-4 pound cookies walk through the door and the £10-20 pound sandwiches walk through the door than pay £400-500 for a security guard.
Right. I mean, this is the problem. This is where it comes to the sort of self-checkouts, where it's kind of priced in. It's priced in, well, there's going to be this amount of product that's then stolen. There'll be this amount of loss, but that's okay because we've written off having to pay the salaries of people who would otherwise be the force field around shoplifting. And I think it's very cynical. And I actually do think, you know, if I was queen for the day, and good luck to society if I was, one of the first things I would do is turn around and say to supermarkets, I'm sorry, the self-checkout days are over. We want staff back on tills. We want to create those jobs for young people. When I was at school, I worked at Safeway. That's how I earned my pocket money.
Yep.
And actually having a job and going to work means I didn't become mentally ill, which a load of 18 to 25-year-olds seem to be today.
Yeah, but do you know what it is now? We're policed. Everything's policed by crime. We don't police crime anymore. We police everything else. You know, just opening the door to the other stuff. We're policed for everything else, but we don't police crime.
Right.
And in America, there was a state in America where they allowed shoplifting, and it's now completely derelict because businesses have just gone bankrupt. Why am I going to pay £600-700 for people to just walk in and walk out with stuff?
Yeah. No, you're right.
Are told.
The thing is with any of those things, the old adage is you give an inch and they'll take a mile. It's the broken windows policy, isn't it? When you let ne'er-do-wells get away with a bit of graffiti, you say, oh, well, they've had to go shoplifting because of food banks. The minute you start showing a degree of weakness, the whole thing unravels. It's like that little thread. As a woman, it's like finding the hole in your tights that you know is going to be a great ladder by the time you finish the working day. Thank you ever so much for your call, Colin. Right, we're going to take a advert break now, but when I come back, we're on, well, a favourite topic of conversation in this here nation, which of course is immigration. I actually have some good news for you on that front. You'll be surprised to hear, so stay tuned and I'm going to let you know what it is after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome back to the show. Now, I did tease you before the break saying I had some good news. It's not exactly the best news in the world. Take it with a pinch of salt, but I suppose it's a step in the right direction, which is that the number of visa applications for the UK has actually fallen by more than a third. And that's just over the past year. And it's said to be a sign that net migration is set to tumble from record levels. The UK received 772,000 applications for visas, down by 37% from the 1.24 million in the previous 12 months. That's according to Home Office visa data. I mean, yay, before we pop the corks on our bottles of champagne, 750,000 people is still way too much. It's way too much. It's ridiculously high, but at least it's going in the right direction. Let's speak now to Alp Mehmet, chairman of Migration Watch UK. Alp, it's fantastic having you back on the programme. I mean, at least something, cautiously celebrate that at least the trajectory, the direction of travel is that visa applications are going down. I always said, actually, when Labour came into power, I think they might surprise us by grabbing the nettle when it comes to immigration and actually do more than the Conservative Party did. Was I right to be optimistic?
No, you were not. Things are considerably worse now than they were. The decrease in the number of visa applications that you refer to, that in fact is as a result of policies, of measures that the Tories put in place anyway. We knew it was going to happen. What's happened is that there aren't any dependents applying for or are able to apply to come here as care worker dependents.
Right.
We've got students who were able to come here for a year's course, ostensibly masters, and bring their dependents. That was stopped. These are the sort of effects that what the Tories put in place are now having. No, I'm afraid that things are going to get worse, and you're right to point to the fact that we may welcome the fact that it's a bit lower than it was, but it's still huge. It's still massive. Let's see how many people are actually leaving in due course. Let's see what net migration figures are. I don't see them coming down much below 500,000, if at all, to that level. That means that we're going to still have millions of people added to our population within a relatively short time, within the next 25 years. If net migration remains at around 600,000, we're looking at another 20 million people added to our population. So, yes, well done. You didn't screw up the Tory policies and measures as you did with the cross-channel and the Rwanda scheme. So at least we should be thankful for that when talking about Labour.
I mean, I just think, how hard can it be? I mean, I heard someone once say, well, the problem is at Cabinet, when it was the Conservative Party in governance, that, they would say, right, we've got to bring down net migration. And then you'd have the Health Minister say, well, can't be me because we've got to have all these people in the NHS. And the business secretary would say, well, it can't be me because the hospitality sector say they need X, Y and Z. And DEFRA would say, well, it can't be us in agriculture because we need the seasonal workers. And education would say, well, we can't do it because without the student visas, the universities won't have enough funding. And by the time they've gone around the table asking everybody to cut migration in their particular department, no one had the wherewithal to do it. And I think, how hard can it be? Surely you just go, we're going to cut net migration. That's it.
Absolutely. The problem is that it's all very well to say we're going to cut net migration. Remember, Boris Johnson said it in 2019. Yes, we're going to bring in a points-based system. But then it's how you arrange things, the sort of behind-the-scenes pressures that lead to measures being put in place that actually suit the employers, that suit the universities. And then you make it even worse by saying to the employers and saying to the universities, you've got a free hand, effectively, to bring in as many as you like, and you will decide on who is suitable for you to employ or to educate. That's nonsense, frankly.
Yeah. No, I just think it should be a case of this is it. We're not allowed to, you're not going to have any more than, 50,000 people. They're all going to be doctors and nurses, and otherwise that's it. it ends. And surely that is possible to do. That would be, of course, until a judge decides the government's wrong and the government's evil and the government aren't left-wing enough, such as this particular judge, who has presided over deportation asylum appeals, and he is now calling to decriminalise illegal migration into the UK. This man sounds like he should be my best friend, frankly. Listen to this. He supported the campaign to reverse Brexit. Oh, right, yeah, because a plebiscite, actually having a nationwide vote on something doesn't matter. He posted jokes about Jimmy Savile. He made derogatory remarks about the Conservative Party and President Trump. He said of the Conservative Party they should be dealt with as you would deal with the Nazis. How do these people end up as judges? He's now pushing for illegal entrance into the UK to be decriminalised. I'm sorry, if you break into a country, you've broken the law. And quite frankly speaking, if I were to turn up at Oman at the border and just storm it and walk in without a visa, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't be given a 4-star hotel, some pocket money and a PlayStation. I'd probably be shot.
I was about to add that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. What this particular judge is calling for is quite baffling. I mean, what he's saying, yes, it's okay to jump into a flimsy dinghy. It's okay to make off from an illegal point on the other side of the channel. It's okay to get here and claim asylum when you're nothing like an asylum seeker should be. You're a bogus asylum seeker. You're an economic migrant. All that's okay. Of course, people are going to come over here and try and get in by any means possible. We've already seen that what the government has actually done or not done with regard to coming across the channel is encouraging people to make their way here illegally. I'm not sure that you need any more changes to the law to allow them to do that. The government is not going to smash the gangs. The numbers are not going to come down. Since 2018, when this first started, there's something like 250,000 people have now come in illegally, around 160,000 in small boats. Then there's another 90 or so that we don't know about. All these people, 250,000 people, the vast majority of them are still here. Now, why wouldn't they make their way here when they know that's going to happen?
Right.
The numbers that we've got in hotels was going to stop. Hotels were no longer going to be used to accommodate illegal migrants. The number's gone up. The backlog has increased, and the numbers coming across the channel in the first 3 months are way, way ahead of anything we've had so far. So that's the extent to which the government is succeeding. The same sort of thing is happening with legal migration.
I always think when they go on about smash the gangs, it's utterly ludicrous. Do they have any idea who the people are behind this stuff? And how this guy is either a radical, I can't say his name. The reason I haven't actually named the judge is because it's an Irish surname, and Lord knows what that combination of consonants and vowels is said like. If Ted, my producer, knows, you can say it in my ear. You don't know, do you, Ted? No, I didn't think you did. No one does. Grego something or the other. But when these people bang on about smashing the gangs, you're talking about, you know, things such as Al-Qaeda, Wagner mercenaries. You're talking about, you know, huge international cohorts with connections to drugs trafficking. You're talking about actually state-backed, malign state-backed operations, not just a few people sitting there and, you know, making a few phone calls and trying to get their mate over in a dinghy late at night. It's a huge illicit operation that earns more money than the international drugs trade now. And actually, this whole idea that we can just delegate responsibility to other people to do the job for us, we're an island, right? We should actually find it easier to defend ourselves than perhaps someone with a large land border that is incredibly hard to police unless you have miles and miles and miles of chicken wire fence or Donald Trump's walls. We should be able to, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, use drone technology and surveillance technology technology to detect these dinghies in the middle of the channel and take them back to France, because the French authorities have proven they're not going to do this for us. Oh no, they're actually giving small boat migrants life jackets. They're saying, here you go, lads, have this. When you get to the other side, phone the English Coast Guard and they'll come and collect you.
Alex, let's first of all say, what encouraging them is wrong. On the other hand, frankly, I don't want anyone to lose their lives. And that's why we've got to be firm. We've got to be very firm about who comes illegally and who can stay. Whilst we say there's no problem, the bill that's going through Parliament now, there's no mention of illegal entry. There is no mention of removal. That has been removed from what had been there, what the Tories had put in there. That is simply encouraging. It's no deterrence at all. And while the EU still has around 250,000, 300,000 people crossing illegally into EU territory, we don't know for sure, but we do know that there are at least 250,000 who came in last year. Once that happens and continues to happen, I'm afraid we will continue to get them turning up on the coast of France and making their way to Dover. That's not going to stop. And the government, you say they surely must know about it. Of course they know about it. They've got the same advisors, the same experts telling them all this that the Tories did. So that when they say we're going to smash the gangs, we're going to stop it, I'm afraid they're lying.
Right. I mean, what's so deeply alarming, and I've heard through my channels, that there are certain allied countries in the Middle East who provided us with intelligence documents saying you do realise that among the cohort of young men who have come into your country from this neck of the woods, a certain number of them are actually jihadist trainers. People who are coming over here to actually train up an army of terrorists in this country. It is a national security threat. And what I don't understand, Alp, I understand, I'm like you, people shouldn't lose their lives at sea. And that's the sort of gamble these people take, getting into a flimsy vessel, knowing that if they float around in the channel, you can't really go, ha, Yabu sucks, go to your demise at the bottom of the brine. You know, you do have an obligation to make sure that people don't die, in the same way that if someone decided to sit on the railway lines, you would go and try and drag them off the railway lines before the train comes. But I don't understand why they have to come in this direction. Why can't the Coast Guard, or I don't know, let's use the Navy or whatever, Border Force, why can't they meet people in the middle of the channel and say, right, we're going to rescue you. You came from France, we're going to take you back there. What would happen? Right, if we did that? Obviously the French are going to kick off about it. There'd be some sort of diplomatic incidents. I mean, they're actually kicking off now about fish while we're trying to figure out how to help Ukraine, because the French are like that. But what would actually technically happen if we did that?
What would technically happen? There's absolutely no reason why we couldn't do it.
Right.
Now, you touch on the French. Let's look at the wide relationship. Clearly, the French are our allies. We are close militarily, socially. We go on holidays there. I mean, all these things. It's just impossible, I think, for us to say, right, we're going to set the SAS on these people. They're going to gather them up, ship them back to France and dump them on the beach. That's just not realistic. It isn't going to happen. And I think that really not only isn't it going to happen, but suggesting that it should, perhaps, is not really helpful. And I'm sorry if I'm almost sounding woke on that. I think that in the long run, it would backfire and we would end up with a bigger problem than we've got even now. However, I don't think that there's any reason why, first of all, we shouldn't resolve from the ECHR. We shouldn't repeal the Human Rights Act. We shouldn't detain those who arrive here, and deal with them quickly and then remove them. Either remove them once they came or send them back to a country prepared to take them. Rwanda is no more, but there are other countries, safe countries, that I'm sure would be prepared to take them back and have them so long as we paid. In the long run, it will be cheaper than doing what we are at the moment.
Couldn't agree more. Alt Mehmet's chairman of Migration Watch UK. Thank you ever so much for being on the show. Right, we're going to take a short break now before the very last segment of my programme today. We're going to be talking about some of the mad stuff coming out of the Welsh government, as they now call themselves, the Senate. The blimmin' thing shouldn't exist, quite frankly. Devolution was a dreadful idea. And you want to know why? Well, stay tuned. I'm going to be telling you after the break.
Just before MPs went off for their Easter break in a way which was probably ill-advised, and I think the presentation and the way that it was handled has been really poor. So I think certainly they're guilty of sort of poor presentation and communication around this. But I don't think they've done a U-turn, and I think, in fact, what they are doing in terms of grooming gangs and the wider issue of child sexual abuse, which is much wider than just grooming gangs, is a considerable amount. They've done a huge amount of work already.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, you'll be pleased to know that the Welsh Government, in all of its sagacity, has decided it needs to have an action plan to become anti-racist Wales. Way! Because Wales is blighted by apartheid. No. The incentive scheme is this incentive scheme that they're talking about now is giving ethnic minority students £5,000 more in grants than white students in becoming a teacher, because there's not enough teachers that teachers get a golden handshake, and an ethnic minority maths teacher can get a total grant of £25,000. All teaching students can access a £15,000 grant if they specialise in a subject most needed in the secondary teaching workforce. But if you happen to be non-white, you get 25k. That, to me, is racism. What is this nonsense? Let's speak to Rafe Hadel-Mancu, commentator at the New Culture Forum. Rafe, fantastic to have you on the programme. I mean, anti-racist Wales seems to me the blueprint is actually being racist against white people.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if the Welsh Government is really determined to make Wales anti-racist, they should be paying English people £5,000 to become a teacher, because that's the only real form of racism you get in Wales. It's anti-English loathing. I have a cousin in Wales, and that's a very real prejudice you encounter. I mean, look, let's be clear here. This is blatant pay discrimination on the basis of race. It should be illegal. It follows on just from another, equally egregious story we had this week about West Yorkshire Police, effectively blocking white candidates from applying for positions in preference for ethnic minority candidates. sometimes months in advance of when white people can do it. And if you want to stoke ethnic tensions in Britain and Wales, if you want to increase, resentment and intolerance, these are just the sorts of policies that are going to achieve that. And it's the sort of stuff that actually triggers and fuels elements on the real far right, and it's hugely patronising towards ethnic minorities. Wales is 94% white. It's no surprise, obviously, that it's going to be dominating by the teaching profession. And you talk about this whole issue about making Wales anti-racist. As part of that, the Welsh government actually wants to, as it says, remove these sort of policies and structures that see different outcomes for different ethnic minority groups. And we know, of course, that the real reason that different ethnic minority groups have different outcomes isn't because of racism. If it was, then the Chinese and the Japanese and the Indians would have terrible outcomes, and they don't. Of course, and white working class boys, as we know, are the most disadvantaged group in society as a whole. The reason you have different ethnic groups having different outcomes and not being represented perhaps in teaching is first and foremost because of class, but also family structure, absent fathers, and also the culture and attitudes in these homes where they're not necessarily raised in an environment that values and supports academic achievement.
Right. I mean, this is talking about that. You made me think of something then, which I haven't spoken about for a while. It's funny, isn't it, that racism only seems to exist when dealing with the black community or dealing with the Muslim community. You don't get Chinese people jumping up and down going, oh, why have we not had a Chinese prime minister yet? Oh, why are there no Chinese newsreaders? And we've had Chinatowns in the UK for decades now. It's not, they don't kick off about it.
Yeah, and in fact, this whole term of ethnic minorities or BAME is inherently racist because you're grouping the entire rest of the world together as if somebody from, Brazil or the Congo or from Tokyo is exactly the same. And, you are reducing everyone essentially down to one great non-white blob. It's inherently racist.
Why is none of this, has this stuff been tested legally? Has anyone actually taken some of these anti-racist action plans to court and said, actually, this adds up to discrimination against an individual because of the colour of their skin?
Well, I'm not sure in terms of this particular sort of situation where the law lies. I would think there would be legal grounds for a challenge. That's certainly the case, for example, with the West Yorkshire Police. What they're doing is they're basically advertising jobs saying ethnic minorities can apply potentially months early in advance, whereas white people are only given a few days, as little as 48 hours to apply. That is very close to the wire, I would say, and I think the courts may come down squarely on the side, hopefully, of reason in that one. And I would hope that there will be an opportunity for this to be challenged as well. Because, of course, yet again, we're seeing this institution, like all our institutions, prioritizing identity over excellence and competence. We want the brightest and the best people to come. And what happens with these policies, as you've seen from all of these DEI hires throughout businesses and organizations, it ends up in poor results and quite often disastrous outcomes.
Yep, indeed it does. Rafe Hadel Manku, thank you ever so much. I'm talking about the brightest and the best. Do you know any people like that, Ian?
You know what? You were funny back in the day, Alex Phillips.
When was that day?
70s.
Well, I'm not that old.
Neither am I.
Are you not?
Well, thanks.
A little bit. You weren't born in the 80s, were you?
I was born before you were born, but
Yeah.
I think there's only weeks in it. I mean, come on.
My skincare regime must be really good then.
Exactly.
Have you ever eaten a goose egg?
A goose egg? No,
Yeah.
I've eaten goose, and I favour goose fat on roast potatoes to cook them.
I had a goose egg for my breakfast this morning.
Did you?
Yeah, massive thing.
Was it was it laid in front of you, or...?
It was not, no. I've got it at Borough Market.
Oh, all right, OK, you didn't see the goose.
£6.50 for one of those bad boys.
£6.50 for one egg?
Yeah, but it is basically, this one egg is the size of sort of 5 or 6 chicken eggs.
What do? You just boil it up in a pan?
Yeah, you just fry it off. I've had an ostrich egg before as well. They're mad.
Well, not in Borough Market,
You actually have to sort of get into an ostrich egg using tools. You can't just crack it. No,
so did you eat it like with a massive kind of sort of Tim Burton-like egg cup?
Yeah, no, my other half cooked it up for me in a load of butter and just put it on a plate. And as I was putting on my makeup, I was tucking into my
goose egg.
Giant egg.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you had it boiled?
No, fried in butter.
So a massive fried egg?
Massive fried egg with a yolk the size